everyone. We're about to start this meeting for June the 18th of 2024. Before we do, I'm going to stand for a moment of silence, follow that by the Pledge of Allegiance. Anyone who'd like to join me, please feel free to do so. Join in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
They got to hold yours too. Before we go to the roll call, Mr. Johnson wanted me to remind everyone that the director's evaluation has been laid by your minutes there. We'd like to get that turned in before by the next meeting. So we'll lay that aside and just let you know that's there. Next item on the agenda is roll call. Mr. Johnson, you got the roll?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is approval of regular agenda as presented.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved from Mr. Daniels, second by Mr. Wise. Any discussion? Mr. King?
Yeah, where is the item for the stadium bids?
Item for what?
Is that under new business? Yeah, okay. Mr. Chairman, we've had this issue before. I don't believe that this item had adequate notice as defined by law to be added to the agenda. And before I make a motion to remove, I just want to remind you that according to state law, this is the Supreme Court of Tennessee, it says that we think it's impossible to formulate a general rule in regard to what the phrase adequate public notice means. However, we agree with the Chancellor that adequate public notice means adequate public notice under the circumstances, or such notice based on the totality of the circumstances as would fairly inform the public. In the abstract, this is a vague concept, but when applied in a real situation or a given set of facts and circumstances, we doubt that such a variation of opinion would exist as to promote confusion. And I want to share, this is from a court ruling, Inglewood Citizens for Alternate V versus the Town of Inglewood. They came up with three criteria for determining adequate notice. Notice must be posted in a location where a member of the community can become aware of such notice. The contents of the notice must reasonably describe the purpose of the meeting or the action proposed to be taken. And then third, the notice must be posted at a time sufficiently in advance of the actual meeting in order to give citizens both an opportunity to become aware of and to attend the meeting. So this item was added 3 hours ago, and it's for a $20 million bid, $5 million more than what the original that we were told was going to be. I just think that this item does not meet the criteria for adequate notice, and so I'm going to make a motion to remove that item from the agenda. And our director is more than welcome to discuss it during his comments, but I don't think we have sufficient adequate notice to be voting on this item. So I so moved.
Motion's been made to remove it from the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Graham. Any further discussion? Ms. Hawkins?
I have a question. This is for discussion of this bid and or decision?
Discussion and or action, yes.
And or action. I would like to discuss it. So if we take it off the agenda, does that mean we can't even discuss it today?
That would be correct, yes, ma'am.
All right.
Further discussion? All right, all in favor of removing it from the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion fails.
Yeah, we might need, can
Uh,
I call for a division of assembly, please?
Mr. Johnson?
Roll call, okay. All right, Ms. Hayes.
No.
Ms. Andrews.
No.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins.
No.
Mr. Daniels.
No.
Mr. Wise.
No.
Mr. Grant.
No.
Mr. Gregory.
No.
Mr. Lacy.
Yes.
Chairman Brewer.
No.
Motion fails.
All right, we're back to the approval of the regular agenda as presented. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Seeing, one no. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of consent agenda. Motion.
Motion to approve.
Approved by Ms. Andrews, second by Ms. Hayes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Excuse me. All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item, consideration of minutes, discussion and interaction regarding the minutes of the May 21st, 2024 regular meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Mr. Wise,
Second.
second by Ms. Andrews. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is recognition and hearing of delegations. We've got a couple of people, public speaking coming up. Tim Jones would come down and give your name and address for the record. You'll have 5 minutes to speak on an agenda item.
My name is Tim Jones, 112 Georgetown Drive, Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm here to speak tonight in case the item was added, but I'm glad it was tried to be taken off because it is not adequate notice by anybody's standards. And with all due respect, I think you're kind of missing the point. I know you'd like to discuss it, so would the public. Nobody knew. They're not here. That's the whole point. It's not just for you guys to speak. It's to give adequate notice for the public to speak. I'm a county commissioner, District 23, and some of the things that I'm concerned about is this spending and the timeline for these stadiums. This needed much discussion, but the public needs to be aware of it so they can come down and voice their opinion because it's their money. You're spending their money. The timeline is all messed up. We bent over backwards, and I think it was 12 days approved the spending that you guys asked for, $15.8 million. And it was all done so that the stadiums could get completed by this coming school year. That was the quote that was quoted. The clock is ticking. Tick, tick, tick. It's ticking. Got to get them done. Now we got another year of temporary bleachers and several million more dollars. I think the public would be highly interested in speaking about that, especially considering that the budget items coming up, the $7.5 million in additional funding, that's a 6% year-over-year increase. The request for the $15 million increase puts us on a path towards deficit spending in the county, which is not sustainable. We may be able to take out non-deficit budget this year, but next year will be very likely it will be deficit spending scenario. And then once you get into deficit spending situation, the tax increase is inevitable. It's just a matter of time. And so all those raises that you're going to be given, a lot of those teachers are taxpayers here too, so their taxes are going to go up. We gave enough money, and the state gave enough money to give raises to the teachers. We think they deserve it. We want them to have the raises. But with finagling of numbers, you can do whatever you want with the budget. By adding 50 new positions and changing around figures, you can say that you're short on funds, but why don't we just give the teachers the money first, give them their raises that they deserve, they well deserve. and then worry about all the other things. As the student population is decreasing, we're increasing our administration. It makes no sense. I would hope that you guys would consider the taxpayers. You didn't consider them by adding that item on the agenda tonight, but please consider them in putting forth a budget that the county commission can pass. I will not vote to raise taxes on our people, and that is the attitude of a lot of the county commissioners. You can do it with the budget that Commissioner Schoaf, Budget Chairman, Commissioner Schoaf has been working in good faith with you guys, some of you guys, and the director of schools, and we gave you a healthy allotment for these teacher raises. It's up to you guys to make it work. This is the worst time of the year to be considering raising taxes. Worst time of the decade to be considering raising taxes with the trajectory this country's on. Just please consider that and be thrifty with the citizens' money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Next is Kate Brooks.
She stepped out.
She stepped out. Let's move on, I guess. We don't have Ms. Brooks. All right. Next item on the agenda, matters involving council. We don't have any canceled. Next item on the agenda is reports from the director. Dr. Langford.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brewer.
All right.
Presentation, because we've got several things, obviously budget being the biggest, and we'll get to it last. I wanted to run through a couple of other things first. See if I can manage this and stay on my computer so I can see it. All right, again, just starting. All right, I want to start with 3rd and 4th grade data. I shared this with you last week. The state contacted us, I believe, on Friday or Monday of the previous week and let us know that they were going to share the data with us last Wednesday and then release it publicly the next day. So we tried to push it out as quickly as we could, just to share with you and share with the community. This is where we are. 2nd grade cohort. 3rd grade last year was a little bit higher when they started. 3rd grade this year, you see an increase from 39.8% at the end of 2nd grade, the benchmark, to 46.9% in 3rd grade. Again, like many of you have stated publicly on social media, everything. This is a snapshot. As we've met with principals and discussed our goals for next year, we are shifting to discuss things like our goal for elementary is to develop successful readers who love to read. What does that look like? It starts in kindergarten, not 3rd grade. Right now, there's a lot of pressure put on 3rd grade teachers because that's the first year where tested subjects begin. And a lot of resources and everything are allocated grades 3 through 5 because those are the tested subjects. What we're projecting and talking about is we've already made the investment with foundational literacy in K2, pre-K through 2, but we want to increasingly focus in those early grades and continue to double down on that because it takes some of the pressure off 3rd grade teachers. It also makes reading something that everybody's committed to across all the grades and across all the subjects. You don't just learn to read in your ELA class or in your intervention, you learn in social studies and science. Literacy spans across discipline. And one of the things that you talk to employers is a literacy that's based on the field that you're in. At times, manuals or things that you use at work were written on about a 6th grade level. Now they're not, and they're going to increasingly get more technical. And so kids need to have literacy not just in fiction, but in nonfiction and other things. And that's something for us to work at across the system. Our 4th grade cohort data, if you look, we're really pleased with this. In 2nd grade, they started at 42.8. So if you look about 3 points higher than this year's 3rd graders, they went to 49.3% last year and 55.4% this year. We're excited to see that growth. We're never going to stop. We're never satisfied until those numbers are significantly higher. I think if you look at our screener scores that are nationally normed, Our kids read at a much higher rate. The test is the test, and it's what we use for accountability in the state of Tennessee, so we will always do the very best we can. But again, we want to look at multiple indicators of reading success. So that's our 3rd and 4th grade cohort data. Had the opportunity, the Commissioner of Education visited yesterday. We had the opportunity to go to Howard Elementary and tour around Howard Elementary with Mr. Spears and Ms. Berry and the teachers and staff at Howard. It was a great morning. We got to go into about 5 classrooms and see some kids coming back. We got to see kids doing art, kids doing PE, kids in the different subjects in an intervention. It was great to see the work that they're doing. That's a really tight window of about 17 or 18 days of instruction, or excuse me, 16 days of instruction. And then the kids rolling out for the summer. But it's good to see the work that our teachers and staff are doing. All right, let's jump into athletic facilities and capital projects. As we start, I'd like everybody to remember, I don't want to go through, I know we got a lot on the agenda tonight, so I don't want to go too deeply into this, but I do want to talk through the process. You know, I think it was my 46th day as director of schools. The visitor side bleachers at Beach High School collapsed. I believe it was around August 16th. You know, it immediately became the focus of what we did in the fall. I was looking back through old board agendas today. So we spent a significant amount of time in the fall. One of the things that we did is we met with principals, athletic directors, coaches, boosters, fans, everybody, and asked them to come together and to put together what they wanted the facilities to look like for the future of their campus. And that's what they did. Now, we have hit a number of obstacles and roadblocks along the way, whether that's, you know, trying to secure rental bleachers last year after football season had started or just as it was about to start, piecing together everything that we could, discovering bathroom problems in Portland, everything else that we discovered last year, having 2 additional stadiums condemned or parts of 2 additional stadiums condemned. We worked through all that. Our intention was to issue the bids and roll forward, try to get done for this year. The comptroller in December issued a report that said that you couldn't buy steel, fabricated steel, on a state contract, and that pushed us to have to bid everything, including the stadium steel, which we did. And those bids came back today. We opened them at 2 o'clock, and at 2:15, after they were done processing everything, our construction team began to make sure that the bonds met everything that it was supposed to, that the specs were met, and they gave as quickly as they could the proposal that you have before you tonight to see. So I just wanted to point out that this is not like a 1 or 2 person enterprise. This has involved most of our communities across the county, and it's not just the 3 stadiums that we're talking about tonight. It's including track at Gallatin High School, track at Station Camp High School. We've already been able, the new gym floor at Station Camp looks great. The new roof at Portland High School. We did a significant amount of capital projects over the course of the past year. We've done great work there and spent a significant amount of money on capital across the county. All right, I wanted to talk about the bid today. There were 2 bidders. There were 9 contractors that came to the pre-bid meeting and drew out the specs and looked at making a bid. There were 2 that completed the process and submitted a sealed bid according to the rules of the bid. Both contractors only bid on all 3 projects. They had the option of bidding on each one individually or bidding all 3 together. Both companies bid on all 3 together, and if you see, A&K Construction came in at $21.9 million, and Biskin came in at $20,058,000. Higher than the $15 million we originally allocated. Of course, the scope of the projects, as we began to look at what the long-term needs of the campus were, also grew over the course of the presentation. And ultimately, when you bid things now in construction, the price is what it comes back as. And if you look, those bids are fairly close. You're concerned if one comes in at say 20 million and one comes in at 24, or one comes in at 24 and one comes in at 16. The bids are pretty tight, and I think that gives you a pretty good idea of what it costs. I would, I know the first comment that I've had people say to me is, can you value engineer this and reduce the cost? You can, but we have to restart the bid process. Regardless of how much you value engineer this, it's going to be an expensive enough purchase that we're going to have to bid it. So we would be restarting the clock on the bids. We now have 2 bids out here, the lowest being 20 million. Everybody can see what the specs were, and they can see the unit costs that are up there. You can see it on the bid. So, the question is, how much money would you really save if you step back and you would sacrifice a lot of the functionality of the stadiums and what it means for the long-term needs of the 3 campuses? All right, in terms of other capital projects, again, these are estimates until you put them out to bid. You don't know exactly what they're going to cost. The Gallatin High School track will be about $3 million, possibly $2.5 million. There's some work to be done to determine. Some of that will depend on how much dirt work needs to be done. What kind of, there are possibilities there that we could, the Gallatin High School would like for us to consider putting an on-campus football stadium. So, the initial with the $3 million, that would be having bleachers on one side for the track that would later become the visitor stand if you move the football field over there at some point. You would spend more money on the front end, but less money on the back end if you already had the visitor side completed. So that's something that we can look at. We can probably, when we do the bid for the Gallatin track, we can look at that as an option so that the board can look at it both ways. Because you could certainly do fewer seats on the track initially, but you would pay more later if we move the football field over there at some point. The Station Camp High School track, somewhere around $1 million, possibly a little less. It's going to depend on the drainage issues and things like that. Preliminary estimate on the Merrill High tennis courts is $750,000, and a preliminary bid on the North Sumner Elementary project is around $750,000. In addition to that, we've got paving, HVAC, roofing, and other capital projects. We made a big dent in those projects this year, but as always, when we have the number of facilities that we have and the number of units and the number of parking lots and equipment and everything else, they're going to be ongoing capital needs. But we did make a huge dent in our campuses. I believe the air is just about complete, if not complete, at the Little Gym at Gallatin. That's been a long-term project. The gym floor at Station Camp, another long-term project. Roof at Portland High School, the chiller at Westmoreland Middle. We've made significant progress. About including this is about $1.3 million in capital. I've heard more compliments for the board that I need to pass on to you about the middle school band investment. Middle school band directors are thrilled because it's the first time in the history of Sumner County there's been that kind of investment made in middle school band. And the last of those were approved tonight on consent. So really thrilled that we're able to do that work, and hopefully all this stuff will come in. It won't all be here at the start of school, but it'll be close, and our middle school bands will benefit. All right, do you have any questions about capital?
Mr. Grant?
Yeah, why have we not put out bids for the tracks yet?
So you don't want to put out the bid until you're ready to bid, because if you put the bid out too soon, then they will inflate the cost because they don't know what construction materials will cost. You can only put a track in when you have a certain number of guaranteed warm weather days because the surface has to cure. I think that's the right word for it, but you have to have a certain number of guarantees. So you basically have a small window on the year to bid a track, to be able to build it with the number of warm weather days.
With that knowledge, why was there such an urgency to move the funds for the track last fall and winter then?
I hope we could get everything in the works, and we had no idea what everything was going to cost. $15 million was what we could pull out of reserve and get started on all the projects.
How much would it cost at GHS to do the track without the bleachers?
What now? I'm sorry.
Without the bleachers for the track, without the...
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear the first one. Which school?
How much would the GHS track cost without adding bleachers?
Maybe I'm just shooting in the dark here. I'd say $2.25 million, somewhere in there.
Mr. Grant, Mr. King?
Yeah, in October you stated that the architect had, you had met with the architect, and it was the opinion that the stadium projects would come in under $15 million. You stated that. So, of course, the architect is not the contractor. I understand that. But what do you think? Why are these so much higher? Why is it another $5 million on top of that? Because that is a significant increase.
I think that if you look at, especially the Beach and Hendersonville projects, each one's a little different. If you look at Beach, you've got significant accessibility issues with where the main entrance now is coming up that hill. It changes the orientation basically of the main entrance. Basically, both projects grew in scale as we met with families and parents and boosters and principals. They truly looked like, if you look at, if you take, for instance, each scenario is a little different. If you look at Hendersonville's campus, they are landlocked, right? There's no more land over there. Most of their spring sports are played in soccer are played at Drakes Creek Park. So, you know, like they lose the baseball field every time we have a flood or a tornado or something, it always hits that park. Same thing with soccer, but, you know, basically for, gosh, I don't know, 30, 40 years, they've played all those games there. But what's happened is that as we've added more and more sports, especially girls sports, there's very limited places for them to dress, to train, to work out, things like that. So Hendersonville's project moves all the football operations underneath the stadium. It then cleans out the iron, or it opens up the iron bunker and some of the other spaces to be able to provide more training facilities for all the different sports, especially, you know, like you've got girls and boys soccer, baseball, softball, Golden Girls, cheer. You could go on through the list, but it maximizes the space at Hendersonville High School. So in doing that, you know, by adding that space underneath. Now, you could cut, I mean, we could have in the original bid, we could have cut all that stuff out and just built bleachers. At some point, we'd have had to done it, and you would go back and it would cost significantly more to add it later. It's more cost effective to do it on the front end. So, you know, you're talking about $5 million more than 15, but you're also talking about significant savings, you know, down the road. Beaches is a little different in the sense that Beach High School had more land when it was opened, and it's acquired more land over the years. But Beach High School, you know, for instance, similarly, Beach High School played baseball, softball, everything at Moss Wright Park or different parks, and then over time added fields. But what there's not on that campus is sidewalks connecting parks, lighting, different stuff like that. This project, in addition to changing the access point to the stadium to behind the annex so that it's flatter, level, more accessible, it also dramatically changes the layout of the stadium. It offers more resources there, better bathrooms, different facilities like that. So basically, you know, as the communities met and expressed what their needs were when we put together in the bid, was just more project than, you know, what we initially said when we were doing bleachers. But the question then becomes, are we just doing bleachers? Or are we addressing long-term needs for the county? And I think what we also said is when we do things, we want to do them exceptionally well, and we don't want to make short-sighted decisions, because part of the issue that we faced with the stadium collapse was the fact that every community was left to their own devices to build facilities, and they did the very best they could over many decades. But, you know, like, it doesn't make sense to come in, to me anyway, and build facilities and save a little bit of money on the front end, but cost yourself a whole lot, or build bleachers and then turn it back over to the quarterback club and say, you're going to have to sign a note and take on $1 million, $1.5 million in debt for your booster club or whatever else to build out the rest underneath the stadium. Those were all stated goals that we also had in the fall to avoid adding those kind of, shifting those kind of costs to parents, because we also wanted them built to the current safety and accessibility standards so that we got away from some of the issues of the cement stadiums that we had before.
Okay, so you're saying that the estimate that we got from the architect, we got that page and it listed everything, that was just for bleachers. It didn't include, you're saying that was just bleachers?
It included some facilities, but nothing like what is in the bid that we approved in March.
As I recall, it included training facilities, bathrooms. I mean, it was like the full package. And that was included in that estimate.
Yeah, we included training equipment and training room, things like that, but what we didn't include was moving all of football operations underneath Hendersonville Stadium. That began to evolve as the architect met with the booster club, the football coaches, the athletic director, the other coaches, the principal of Hendersonville High School, Beach High School, and Portland.
So it changed. So in the course of time, that original estimate, we added a lot of stuff to it. Is that correct?
We added some services, yes, some expansion of facilities, yes.
Okay, I don't recall that being presented as new additional. This is going to be additional costs.
I mean,
you know,
I think we laid out the changes that we were making, and they were definitely in the bid that we approved in March.
I'm gonna have to go back and look, because I just remember seeing the layout of the 15.8 million, and it included quite an extensive amount of facilities, training, storage, locker rooms, bathrooms, all of that.
Yeah.
So back to my original question. So what you're saying is we have added $5 million more of items to these stadium projects.
No, I don't know that that's the case. I don't know how you would put a specific number on that, because ultimately.
We were saying we added. There were things that were not in the original estimate that we saw on that sheet. And I'll pull it up here.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to let me finish the sentence that I started. I said we did expand the scope some, yes. But you also, as I said from the beginning, you don't know what you're going to get back until you actually open the bid. That's why we do the best we can to get the most accurate statements that we can. But, until you send the bid out, you don't know exactly what you're going to get, because, construction costs are variable now based on materials and supply chain. I mean, you've got Oracle moving in. You've got, we got 2 bids. That's helpful. We've had projects in the past where you got 1 bid.
Is there a way to get a breakdown of these bids? Like, here we've got 20 million, but 5 million is for Beach or Henderson. You know what I mean? Is there a way to get a breakdown of each?
If you look, it's got a unit price there. Not $128 cubic yard. I think that's cubic yard. I can ask and see what we can get. I don't think the individual bid documents, because they're probably like, Biskin, the winning bidder, they've got people, but they're not going to put out how they bid every component, because then every other competitor is going to be able to see how they price.
I mean, it would just be nice for people to see like, here's what Beach costs, here's what Portland costs,
right.
Here's what Henderson costs.
You could look, if you look at that cost, you could probably look in the bid and calculate the size of the facilities and get pretty close if you look over.
So I'm just, we were told the architect, and I think this architect works a lot with Biskin. They do a lot of projects together, and I've talked to other people in the field who can get an estimate pretty close, but an additional 5 million is not very close. And so I'm just confused by the original statement of we can get this under 15 million. And I think it included bathrooms, athletic training facilities, locker rooms, all that. So I don't know. I'd have to really look.
At the end of the day, the fact of the matter is this was a sealed bid conducted exactly by state law. I would be really careful at implying that because Mr. Cromer works with Biskin, because Biskin has won a number of contracts, like that really borders on accusing Mr. Cromer of it. No, hang on, let me finish. I'm just warning you. Just warning you that I think that borders on that, because I will tell you I've worked with Mr. Cromer for...
You're missing my point. No, I'm not accusing him. I'm saying that they are pretty... When we get these guys that work in this business can get pretty close on estimates, and that's why it just seems, I'm not accusing that there's some kind of impropriety.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. Number one, I've heard a couple comments and I've seen some emails talking about how the commission gave us $15 million towards the stadiums. Did they actually give us $15 million, or was that money that was already in our budget that they authorized us to be able to use if we'd been able to bid the projects at the end of last year?
Yeah, what the commission did was allow us to basically move money from our savings account to our checking account. It was money that was in school system reserves that we moved into capital expenditure lines. We also moved $2 million of that out of capital back into operations so that we can pay for the rental bleachers for this football, for this coming fall, spring and fall.
And that leads to kind of my second question. In regards to this bid, I believe you did a presentation, I think it was early this year, on the facilities. Mm-hmm. And you had mock-ups of the stadiums, the designs. You had the underneath built out where you'd mentioned that those is where the training facilities and everything else were going to be. Are those designs what we bid?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what you had presented to us previously is what we bid?
Yes.
All right, okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. All right, I want to shift courses just a little bit to something we're really excited about, which is TCIS training. We're blessed to have Mr. Hallman here, I think. Is David here? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Let me brag a little bit on Miss Katie Brown and Mr. Hallman, and the Safe Schools has kind of spearheaded this along with support from the instruction department to put together. Most of you have probably not heard of TCIS, but you have all heard of the fact that we have a significant number of kindergartners, and not just kindergartners, but kids K-12, coming in with profound emotional needs. All right, so part of the only way that we begin to solve that, if we budgeted $25 million tonight for mental health resources, there are not $25 million worth of mental health resources to be had out there. There aren't enough counselors, there aren't enough therapists, there aren't enough behavioral specialists. They just don't exist. The way that we can put a dent in the needs of our community is simply put by working together. Now that requires a multifaceted strategy. I want to give a huge shout out to Ms. Dam. Ms. Dam came, I think I've been up here a week in 2018, and we sat down to talk about the behavior needs. Shortly thereafter, Katie, Norma, and I began talking about what do we do. And the reality is a couple of things. Like, you've got to have a shared language so that when parent, I can remember early as an assistant principal, one of the first lessons I learned is that a lot of parents, when their child got in trouble, they had also gotten in trouble when they were in school, and they didn't always have the best experience in school. And so when they came into your office, if you can imagine what it's like, they're upset at their child a lot of time. They're upset that their child is in trouble. They don't understand everything going on. And we sometimes in education speak a language of jargon that's inaccessible to outsiders. And so it puts people on edge. So one of the things that we need to be able to do is have a shared language across the district that we can share with parents so that we can all be on the same page. Because I also found as a young assistant principal that if I sat on the same side of the table as the parent when they came in, and I said this simple sentence, I don't know if you're experiencing this at home, but this is what's happening at school. And 99% of the time the response was, oh my gosh, he does that at home and it drives me crazy. And I'd say, let's figure out how we can address this at home and at school. And about 98% of the time we could resolve everything for the benefit of the child and for the family and for the teacher in school. So TCIS begins to give us the opportunity to develop that shared language and practice across the district. So how did we get here? I shared a little bit of our teacher feedback, administrator feedback, student and family feedback, discipline data. The one thing that we want to increasingly move away from, I want to be real careful in how I say this. We are not talking about some other districts have gone to a policy where they just don't suspend kids anymore. We're not saying that we're moving away from disciplining kids. What we are saying is that when we suspend a student out of school or even in school, we are taking them out of Tier 1 instruction, which is the most valuable resource that we give them. So we want to use suspensions as an increasingly last resort and develop language and practices that help us across the district.
Take a question, Dr. Langford.
Yes.
Mr. Lacy?
Yes, mine goes back to the previous on capital projects.
Yes, sir.
What's the status with the tracks? Why have we not gotten bids on the tracks?
We got to be closer to the time that we can. If you bid them 6 months before you can build them, you can only build them when you got enough warm weather days for them to cure and everything. So if you bid them too far out, they're going to increase the cost because they're not going to know what materials
But
cost.
isn't it the priority is the same as the bleachers, or is it kind of a secondary?
No, it's the
priority?
same. It's the same priority, but you've got to be able to do it when you can actually build it.
I mean, we've had a year and a half, haven't we? Has it been? It's been over a year since we've been dealing with bleachers, right?
No.
No, it's not been a year yet. So when would you optimally like to have the bid?
I would like to break ground and start in the spring on Gallatin. Whenever that, I don't know, like I'd have to check with the architect to see when does that warm weather kick in. I'd like to do back the bid up so that we can break ground on it the first day that's warm enough to.
In the spring.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. So what is TCIS? It's a practical system of strategies and principles for building relationships and restoring relationships. Some point in the fall, we'll have Mr. or Ms. Brown, Mr. Hallman, and their teams come in and share the data and share some of those. I just want to give you a little overview because we're right in the middle of training now, and it's really exciting. So students that feel connected come to school and perform better academically. There's a 30% increased failure rate on standardized tests after 3 or more suspensions, and the impact of in-school or out-of-school suspension is identical on student achievement. So today we had the opportunity, Rigsby, if you've ever been over the Rigsby building, which is the maintenance building, transportation building, it's always hustling and bustling with all the work of taking care of our facilities. But there's a large conference room up there, one of the largest in the district, and it has been converted into a mock kindergarten classroom training room. Melanie Webster, who supervises our attendance department, and Gene Hessen, right up there in the 3rd row, are training right now all of our pre-K and kindergarten teachers with a variation of TCIS that specifically addresses the needs of kindergartners and pre-K students as they come in, right? Like if you imagine kids come with different challenges regardless of the age, especially when they're coming from a multitude of different places. But kids coming into kindergarten, you've got kindergartners that can read, and we have kindergartners that aren't potty trained. It's across the board where kindergartners are coming in. So they have a different set of needs than a 3rd grader, or 2nd grader, or a 5th grader, or a 9th grader. They all have needs. TCIS addresses all of them, but the needs of pre-K and kindergarten are different. And so they put together a training where they're modeling and working through what it means to set up classroom procedures and practices, what it means to meet kids where they are, but move them very quickly towards success. This will not remove the need for every child to have significant more intervention. Ms. Dam's team and SPED will still need to do behavior plans and work on identifying student needs and address those. But what we've seen increasingly over the last couple of years are kids that come to kindergarten, pre-K and kindergarten with behaviors that aren't special education students or that don't qualify for special education services, but they've, especially I think the aftermath of COVID and the isolation, they've never played in a group of 3 kids. They've never been to daycare. They've never been to preschool. They've not been told no. They've not been made to walk in a line. And sometimes the effect is when they're told no, they destroy the classroom. And that's not an acceptable behavior. And sometimes that behavior is contagious. It's fun to destroy the classroom. And it puts an astronomical amount of pressure on the teacher and the principal. So what our goal is with this is to put in a Tier 1 behavior strategy across the district that will probably meet the needs of 93, 95% of our students and give us a common language. Let me share for y'all, this is what we're doing currently. Last summer we trained 92 certified teachers to become TCIS trainers. We will have them as trainers as long as they're in the district. This is a phenomenal investment. Cornell, that created TCIS, is studying us to see how, Katie, to my knowledge, we're probably the only district that's run TCIS to this kind of scale, or one of a very few.
Yes.
Knox County has invested heavily, but I don't know if it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've got 114 summer sessions. Basically, what we're investing is each year teachers have 3 days of district professional learning. We do curriculum implementation, different things like that. This year, all 3 of those days are aligning ourselves across the district on behavioral support and language. So the good thing for teachers is they're able to choose the 3-day session over the entire summer. So they're going to pick up 3 days. It's always a rush right at the start to get school started. A significant number of our teachers are completing this training ahead of time, so they'll have 3 additional days at the end of the summer, or some will be doing it the last week before school starts. But we've already trained 550 teachers this summer at 42 locations, and we'll have another 2,280 that will train over the next month and a week. Really excited about TCIS. And again, when we're done, we'll bring Ms. Brown and Mr. Hallman and their teams to let them come and share the data, the results, and the outcomes, because it's pretty exciting. I want to give, again, I want to give a shout out to Ms. Dam, because she's been the driving force for many years about getting support from kindergarten teachers and, behavior challenged students as they make the transition and get better. Okay, I did not put it. Let's jump into budget. I meant to put a transitional slide in and I missed it. But that's the worst mistake I make tonight. We'll be all right.
Mr.
So our
Chairman.
guiding question for budget was, how are we?
Mr.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Graham?
Yeah.
Going back to the TCIS,
Yes, sir.
has there been any more thought put into allowing BAs and ABAs and specialists, outside providers to come in and observe and create these plans for the teachers? That might make things easier if we know on an individual level how to speak to that child directly. You know, a lot of times they receive those services at home and in a clinical setting. Of course, those are far different environments than a school setting.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yes, yes, we have a board policy about having other agencies coming into our school, and we do not allow other agencies to come in, just like we don't let other practitioners, you know, therapists or you know, coaches or anything else. So our school board has a policy that prevents that.
That's a policy that we could write or change or
It
work
is.
on. Because I mean, as you stated, if you had $1 bazillion, there still wouldn't be enough providers to hire at the school level.
Yeah.
But there are providers out there already following these kids.
Yeah, I think the balancing act, Mr.
There's
Graham. is
also,
what-
I'm sorry, Katie reminded me that there's also a state law that prevents for-profit organizations to be providing in our schools.
I didn't understand. What did you say?
She says there's a state law that prohibits for-profit enterprises from coming into the school during the school day to deliver services.
All right. It's been my experience that a lot of the organizations that provide those services are not-for-profit.
That could be, but hang on, I got it. I think the balancing act there is that's the challenge is that when we're allowing therapeutic services to take place during the school day, you only have so many days in classes, and we're pulling those kids out of class, and a significant amount of behavior is not being acclimated to the routines and procedures in the classroom. That would be one of my concerns. It's something we can always look at. It is a policy that the board could change.
Right. No, and I see where you're coming from. Obviously, I have a child with an IEP.
Yeah.
I know there's only so many minutes in a day, and it's give and take, and what do we sacrifice to put in place? The concern I've heard from most parents with children with special needs is that they don't want a provider in the school for application or intervention. They want the provider in the school for observation so they can better understand that setting.
We do allow, we have a policy for a provider to come in and do an observation. So we've always had that, so they can
Regularly,
come
or
and
just-
do an
just one and
observation.
done?
Pardon?
I said regularly, do they get to come on a regular basis?
Not on an everyday basis, but we can arrange an observation.
I just think it would be helpful with all of this.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. All right, let's jump into budget. Okay. Again, just to jump back to where we were last month as we looked at the budget, how are we providing the best pre-K through 12th grade education for all Sumner County students? That was our guiding question on everything that we put together in this budget. What were our Sumner Ready budget goals? Invest in preparing students for the future of their first career, provide opportunities for students to learn in real-world settings, increase compensation for all staff, address critical school facility needs, and continue to innovate as a school district. I won't tarry on it long, but I did want to go through the budget process. This slide you've seen before, that carries us through the May board presentation. I want to give you a little bit of an update on what's taken place over the last month, or 4 weeks. May 21st, the school board approved the budget by a vote of 9-1. The county, on May 30th, the County Commission Budget Committee rejected our budget. On June 3rd, I received projected revenues for 2024-2025 from Mr. Lawing. On June 12th, I received forecasted revenue for 23-24 from Mr. Lawing. And June 17th, I received projected property tax allocation percentages from Mr. Lawing. Understand that the Budget Committee at the County Commission is still working through their budget, so those penny allocations and percentages, like for instance, when I talked to Mr. Lawing, they still haven't received some of the final stuff from the property tax assessor because they're still processing appeals and things like that. It's a tax appraisal year, So it makes things like budgeting a little wonky because it's hard to get the same revenue numbers that we typically get. But I think it's pretty close now. We're pretty late in the game. I know the Budget Committee has a meeting on Thursday where they're working on a lot of the county general budget stuff. And so I think we'll have a pretty firm picture of where we are on Thursday in terms of some of these questions. All right, so let's look at revenue projections. I wanted to think I appreciate Mr. Shove on May 30th as he introduced me and as we talked about the budget process. I don't love the fact that our budget got voted down, but I appreciate, Mr. Shove and I have worked really well throughout this process, and I appreciate the work he's done at Budget Chair. I can assure you that being the Budget Chair at the County Commission is probably the worst job in Sumner County politics. You end up making everybody angry at some point, right? Because you have to tell everybody no to some degree. What have been our goals as we work together at the county is to work in good faith with the county mayor, the county commission, elected officials, and department heads to approve a budget that benefits the whole county. We're not trying to put together a budget that takes everything from all the other departments and elected officials. To find common ground where we, that doesn't make sense, where we can identify common budget goals, and then to ensure that we continue to provide the best for our students, staff, and families. All right, so I want to give you a little bit of an idea. So we receive a TISA update each month until June. Early in July, we'll receive our final TISA allocation. All right, so it changes, as you saw, it decreased 1.3 million from March to April. It decreased another 177,000 from April to May. That's in where they do, it's the part of the sausage maker that we don't get to see. It's the part done at the state level to calculate local contribution. And it just, whatever adjustments they made, it reduced our income by about another 177,000. So that's 7.628 million increase from last year. I did want to mention in this, because there was some talk from one of the speakers earlier, that between the county and the state, we received enough money to cover the teacher raises. The teacher raise to go to $47,800 is the halfway point for us to get to $50,000 next year. That, if you remember, that cost over $9 million to go halfway. It would have cost another $9 million to get to $50,000. What came to us from the state, what's reserved in TISA for teacher pay raises, is $3.9 million. So $3.9 million is around what we got in TISA, because the $7 million that you see there is all state grants in TISA. It's not just identified for teacher pay raises. So $3.9 million of that $7.6 million increase was identified in, and this is a part I really understand what the legislature is doing. They used to get really frustrated under BEP because they would increase teacher raises, so they put money in for teacher raises, and if you were above the state minimum, you could use the money however you wanted, and a lot of larger districts would use that money elsewhere, and it frustrated the legislature, which I completely understand. If you put money in a budget for pay raises, then you expect it to go for pay raises. So in TISA, they corrected that, and there's a dedicated part for what goes towards teacher pay raises, but understand that was 3.9 million. Our raises were about 9.5, maybe, somewhere around there, million. All right, so let's talk about county revenue. So this is, on the top part is budgeted revenue. This is every year in the spring, the county finance director gives us a projection about where he thinks our revenue will be, and then we budget based on that. And as we've said before, it's a great practice. Mr. Lawing is really conservative in the way that he estimates revenue, which is a great budgeting practice. What you don't want to do is project revenue liberally and then come up short and have to cut at the end of the year. We've been in that boat before 15, 16 years ago. I know when Dr. Phillips first came, there was money that was budgeted on growth money that didn't come in, and we had to scramble to find them, and some of you that were here remember that time. So basically, if you look at that budgeted revenue, 21-22, our budget was $122,864,000, went to $126,562 in 22-23, the same in 23-24, and then our budget request that we presented last month was right around 141 million. What we're going to present to you tonight is the 134 million with a request for an additional 5.3, 5.4 million from the commission. Okay, so I wanted to spell that out. That would be our budgeted revenue. I'm going to walk through how we get there. And again, remember, this is not my budget. This is the school board's budget, so you can make any additions or changes or subtractions that you want. But let me put what we've worked on for the last 17 or 18 days to put together for you tonight. The revenue that we have received is different than the revenue that we budgeted. So we talked about before, when you project revenue conservatively, what you want to have happen is more revenue come in than you projected. So you can see there, 21-22, we received 125 million. That goes to 134 million in 22-23. What Mr. Lawing has shared our projected, or our forecast revenue for 23-24. Remember, we're still about 2 weeks away from closing out this fiscal year. What is forecast is $136,092,475. What we were given as an allocated budget from the County Commission from Mr. Lawing was $134,062,553. So that's a $2 million reduction between what was forecast for us to receive in 23-24 and our 24-25 allocated budget. So let's walk through that. And again, I'm just putting this all out there. I'll say, like, it's been really easy to work with Mr. Schoaf and the budget committee. I'm just laying all the numbers out so you can see as you're doing as you're making a decision tonight. All right, county maintenance of effort is $126,592,544. So if you look, our 21-22 actuals were $125,144,000. Our 22-23 actual was $134,277,016, and the 23-24 forecasted, you can see that, and then our 24-25 allocated budget. So remember what I told you last month, when Mr. Schoaf and I were talking on the phone, and they're in the midst of doing budget hearings to meet with everybody in the county. Every county office, every elected official, receiving our budget, dealing with property tax appraisals that went up 76% in places or higher, and a lot of people appealing, which completely jammed the tax assessor's office. So there's a lot of moving parts in April and May when you're trying to put a budget together. So Mr. Schoaf told me that we were getting $7.5 million more. Okay, I interpreted more to mean that we were getting $7.5 million more than we actually received the previous year, that $134,277,000. So Ms. Brown and I added the $7.5 million to it. What Mr. Schoaf meant, what the budget committee meant, was adding that $7.5 million to the $126,592,000, the maintenance of effort, which was our budgeted revenue from 2022-2023. So if you see, we've been on that 126 for 2 consecutive years. So if you look at that, and it's just I appreciate Mr. Schoaf's kind words that neither one of us were dealing in bad faith. We're just looking at the same numbers differently. I thought it was $7.5 million to what we had received in 22-23. He meant $7.5 million in addition to the maintenance of effort amount of $126,592,000. That's as clear and transparent as I can say that. And I agree with Mr. Schoaf's interpretation. I think we both acted in good faith, and we just missed each other. All right, I do want to share, there's some changes that are different than what we've done in the past. Okay, understand, like, I don't know how else to explain it. Commissioner Mo Taylor used to describe it as you got a bucket of pennies because the property tax is allocated by penny. I have found that buckets of pennies don't mean much to anybody outside of a county commission or a finance director or something like that. Basically, if you're sitting on the county budget side, or if you're the finance director at the county, you're looking at all the revenue that comes in, and it comes from a host of different sources. This is all the county revenue. Okay, so you're talking about, these are all the taxes and revenues that we collect in Sumner County. Property tax, prior year trustees collection, circuit clerk, clerk and master, interest and penalties, payments in lieu of taxes from TBA, payments in lieu of taxes, local option sales tax, wheel tax, local mixed drink tax, marriage licenses, helping schools, and the interstate telephone tax. All those come into the county and they're allocated by percentage to different entities across the county. That's how you fund the schools, the county general, the sheriff's office, the highway department, all the different elected officials. Okay, so you can allocate those percentages however the county commission votes. The number for the county commission for the schools that they have to hit is $126,592,000 because that's our maintenance of effort. All right, so what they have done is add to that the $7.5 million to the, or they've taken, excuse me, let me go back one more. Actually, if you look on the front page, yeah, it's about 134 million. That's what the county is increasing us by. Okay, above the maintenance of effort. All right, so, but this is how the revenue is being shifted around. So if you look in 21-22, property tax, the schools received 58.58% of the property tax. 60.61 in 22-23 and 60.61 in 23-24. That number for the proposed amount for 24-25 is 50.27%. So that's a big decrease in property tax. It's offset by, I don't have, like, sales tax is different than property tax. Property tax is pretty easy to calculate and divide up. Sales tax, there's a lot of moving parts to this, but basically these are the projected revenues given to us by Mr. Lawing, and Mr. Lawing is very skilled at calculating sales tax. So you can see it's increased from 34 million projected in 23-24 at the end of this month to 47,989,000. Like, that's not a lot of new sales tax coming into Sumner County. That's shifting the percentage that the schools get versus property tax. Now, what does that mean for the school board? Property tax is stable, right? Like, generally, even in a recession, 93 to 95% of property taxes are collected each year, right? Like, you want to stay in your home. Most of the time, it's built into our mortgages, and it's paid out in escrow. So property tax is stable. There will also not be, the fewest number of houses in Sumner County ever is right now. The number of houses will increase. Every time a house is built, it adds more to the property tax revenue that comes in. So that tends to grow over time at a more consistent, stable rate than sales tax. Sales tax, some years you get a lot more because the economy's good and people are spending money. But when the economy tails off, if there's a recession, sales tax drops a lot. Now in Sumner County, it's been consistently stable for a long time. Even in 2008, 2009, we still saw increases in sales tax, even though the rest of the economy was in recession. But that's the reality. Sales tax, higher gain, but also higher risk. So that's just, that's if you want to understand how Mr. Lawing and Mr. Shope, they could probably do a lot better job explaining that than I do, but that's the version of how you look at county revenues. And you can see the clicker's not. Okay. All right, here we go. And you can see this is a historical trend. I know it's hard to see, even if you're looking at it on the screen in front of you, but that's the historical trend of county revenue over the last 4 years. Okay, projected reserve. Ms. Brown and her team, you see Trevor and Rhonda out there, they've done yeoman's work, person's work over the last 3 weeks, getting everything turned around to share what we're sharing tonight. So again, we're 1 month closer, month and a half closer to the end of the budget year. So we're getting closer to having actuals. They're getting ready. It's also hard for them because they're closing out the books, and that's important too. So if you look, our fund balance would be a little bit lower. I think we had 4.9 million last time. Our fund balance, unbudgeted fund balance at the start of the year would be $4.478 million. Now understand, that number moves because as we close out, if we don't spend money in a line, that money will come in as unbudgeted fund balance. But it'll be closer than it usually has been because Ms. Brown's done a tremendous amount of work to scrub that and see. Also, there are some variables, just moving into the next year that we're uncertain about. Paternity and maternity leave, non-exemption statuses, continued inflation, filling. We've had a lot of unfilled positions, and that's where a lot of our undesignated fund balances come from. We expect as compensation goes through that more of those unfilled positions will be filled, and we won't catch all that money in reserve like we have for the last few years. Okay, so our current budget requests $5.37 million in additional revenue from the county commission. The current county budget increases county revenue by $14,367,440 while asking the schools to budget $2 million less than we were forecasted to receive for 23-24. There's currently around $18 million in unallocated capital in the commission budget. Capital expenditures do not affect maintenance of effort. We receive zero investment income from our GP accounts. Investment income could conservatively reach $5.5 million in interest. Investment income does not affect maintenance of effort. GP fund has a rounded average cash balance of $120 million that draws interest. Self-insurance fund receives $225,000 a month and could draw interest. School nutrition fund draws $50,000 a month and could draw interest. Currently, that interest income does not come to us. To be fair, it's not something historic. Like the last 10 years, the interest rates were so low that you weren't really garnering enough interest to really worry about. Now I know, for instance, like you'll see some CDs for 13 months for 5.5%. So there's some, I know that I'm on financial management. There's been a lot of conversation about where can we move the money of the county. I think Mr. Lancaster's mentioned this several times. Where can we put the money of the county to draw a higher interest rate? To be fair to the trustee, like when you were getting 0.38% interest and it was going to incur fees, but getting 5.5%, 6% interest is totally different. So that's something for us. Again, I'm saying this not to pick a fight with the budget committee or the county commission, just to lay out that there are options to get to the $5.4 million that we need to balance our budget, and several of those don't affect maintenance of effort. I know that's my conversations where the biggest issue is not seeing a $14 or $15 million increase in maintenance of effort to the schools and then having to guarantee that again next year. So I think there are ways for us forward to meet the needs of our school system without increasing maintenance of effort above the $7+ million that's in there currently. All right, so here are some cuts that Ms. Brown and I have worked on that we think we can make to our budget and still be strong as a school district.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So going back to that last slide, you were talking about other options. But once we budget that, doesn't that become part of the maintenance of effort? If we budget it, or are you talking about using some of these other options, like shifting? I don't know.
Well, can I give you an example, Mr.
Sure.
Casey? So, like, capital, for instance, does not count towards maintenance of effort. So, like, if the county gave us an additional, say, $6 million in capital, we could shift around our budget to balance it, but it wouldn't increase maintenance of effort.
Okay.
So what you would have to do is we would have to move operational and other expenses, fund balance around, but you can do that in such a way that it doesn't increase the county's maintenance of effort.
Okay, so
The county typically will hold that.
You don't need to use the microphone, Ms. Brown.
The county, when this has been done in the past, they actually have the money in their budget that is, like, I guess, allocated to us, or, dog-eared for us, however you want to say that. And then we go through David Lawing at the county to spend those funds, as opposed to our books here. So you would never see those expenditures on our financials because those would show up on David's financials, the capital.
okay, so it's not part of our operational; it's theirs, but we're co-opting it through them. Okay.
If we received, if you went back, if you changed the property tax percentages, like if you took that 50.27 to 55%, and we received that in revenue and we budgeted it, then it would go towards maintenance of effort.
Right. Okay.
Okay? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Daniels, I'm sorry.
Thank you, that's all right. But to clarify, so in the past, the commission has reached into capital to help fund purchase of buses. I believe textbooks in year past as well. They provided $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever that dollar was, and that did not affect maintenance of effort, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and again, I just wanted to kind of clarify some examples that
Yeah.
we've seen in past budgets or past budget years. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think I don't think we're that far apart. I think we can work through this. Again, so some proposed cuts to the school budget. We can reduce bus purchase, like Mr. Grasty and his team have done a tremendous job managing our fleet. 7 or 8 years ago, we couldn't have done this. If we didn't buy 5, 6, 7, 8 buses a year, we were going to be behind. We can buy 3 buses this year, and there will be a year, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, we'll have to buy 5 or 6 instead of 3 or 4. But we can manage in the short term just purchasing 3 buses instead of 6 to 8 like we normally do. So we can reduce the capital expenditure for buses by $500,000. We had $500,000 in there for land. In case we found a piece of land that we wanted to purchase for future location for a school. You know, to be honest, we probably weren't going to find anything for $500,000 that we could build a school on. If we did find a piece of land, you know, we always need to be looking. But if we did find a piece of land, that would be something where we would either have to look at using our reserves or talking to the commission to talk about going together to purchase land or something like that. That would be more of a partnership arrangement. But, you know, realistically, we don't have to buy land right now. We're in pretty good shape. But we do want to be looking, at some point we're going to have to build, you know, an elementary or middle school, and I'm talking like 10 years. You know, sometime over the next 10 years, we're going to have to build a new school. You know, it'd be best, because the thing is, you know, they're not making more land in Sumner County, and if we have the opportunity to buy a parcel of land, that would be a good site for a school. Especially the parts where we're going to need to build schools, the land is disappearing quickly. So it's something for us always to be on the lookout. I mean, I'd remind you that, you know, we got the steal of the century on the land for Liberty Creek. I believe it was like, I can't remember, it was, Brown, do you remember? I think it was $13,000 an acre or something like that. It was obscenely low. Anybody would pay $13,000 an acre for land in Cottontown right now.
Well, then give it back to us.
Yeah, and then he donated $8 million back to us for a $3.7 million purchase. All right, reduce the undesignated fund balance by $469,000, and then net decreases across the budget. There are some things we can do, like we spend about $750,000 a year on technology in the district. Each school gets an allocation based on the number of students that they have. We're in a position now with going one-to-one with iPads last year. We think what we can do is catch that money out of, a part of that money out of the Brown Trust that's given to us to use towards technology. So we can shift that money. It doesn't hurt us. We can still provide the same amount of technology support to the schools, but just change the source of the revenue for it. And then there's some other things, you know, like when you do a budget the size of ours, there are always some duplicates and things like that. So the net of that is $661,808, and that puts us decreasing our budget by $2.1 million. So to summarize, we make budget adjustments of $2.1 million and then request additional revenue from the commission of $5.368 million. That closes the gap of the $7.5 million. And so my recommendation would be to approve the adjusted 24-25 GP budget. The other thing that, if you look at the document, what it does is it captures those revenue estimates that Mr. Long gave me on the Monday after our budget was voted down. So we actually have, it's just a more accurate document because it captures those revenue estimates. Oh, and I'm sorry, one more slide. Let me be clear, because we're going to go on contingency, right? Like the next steps, as I mentioned, the County Commission Budget Committee meets on Thursday, but that's for County General. And then there is a joint Education Budget Committee meeting on July 15th. And the actual committee meeting or commission meeting to approve the budget is on July 29th. Okay, so what does that, so that means like when the June 30th budget year expires, we go on what's called a contingency budget. So what does that mean? All the pay raises that we're talking about doing in compensation are frozen, okay? We use previous year's salary schedules. There are no capital projects. So athletic facilities, like we can't sign, if we approve the bid for the football stadiums tonight, we can't begin work until the budget is approved. Bids on athletic facilities, just so you know, we have 60 days from the opening of the bids today to sign, or the bids expire. If the bids expire, there will be no new facilities open in August 2025. There's just not enough time to turn around because we would have to go through another bid process. You know, the cost would go up because everybody's seen the bids that are out there now, and the cost would probably move up. We can only spend 1/12 of our previous year budget each month. It creates a massive amount of work for HR and finance. Because if you look, employees will receive raises retroactive to July 1st if the budget is approved. So basically, let's say that the budget is not approved until, let's just say it is approved on July 31st, okay? Everybody that gets paid, like all of our 12-month employees in July, would receive what they received last year as pay this year. So they would have to go in and update all the salary schedules and then pay them in August if we can get it turned around. It might probably be September before we can get it turned around. They will receive the money that they would have been due in July, but it'll probably be September before they get it, because they'll have to go back and calculate what's the difference between what you received in July versus what you would have received with a raise and a step. So that's the journey. You know, it becomes a lot more important because August 15th is when teachers receive their new pay scale. So if the budget's not approved in early August, then it's going to be almost impossible for us to turn around. We're probably looking, even for teachers on that August paycheck, them receiving this year's, this past year's wages. Now they will get the difference, but it'll be once the budget's passed, whenever payroll can get all the salary schedules updated. So that, as you can imagine, that's a tremendous amount of work on our finance and HR team. It creates an extraordinary amount of work for them. We usually try to avoid contingency budgets to the best of our ability. There's a lot of factors that contributed to this, and it's happened in 2019. I think it happened in 2014, and then I think before 2014 it happened almost every year, from back until like I was a child. It's not something that's uncommon. It's just something with the system, the scale of hours. It's unfair to our employees. It's going to be hard, especially on those classified employees that are coming on board for the increased compensation, and then they're not going to receive that. You're talking about a significant amount of pay differential. Now, it'll be nice when they get the lump sum, but it'll be hard on them that first bit of time. So that's a contingency budget. Just want to be really clear what that means, because we haven't had it since 2019, so a lot of people have no memory of what a contingency budget is like, but it really is a threat for capital projects.
Yes, quick question with the capital projects. With paving, was that on previous year's budget, or is that included this year's budget? I know we talked about specifically paving, like Buccaneer Boulevard, it's desperate need to have that paved. So is that, that's part of capital projects that's frozen, or that was budgeted through last year's budget that will still happen this summer?
We haven't done any bids on that, so that would be next budget year. I'm all done.
All right, I need my agenda back. There it is. All right, so we're moving to new business now. Discussion and interaction regarding bids for VHS, HHS, and VHS football stadium. Motion to approve. Motion approved, Mr. Daniels, second by Mr. Wise. Any discussion? Mr. King?
Yeah, do we need to move this item until we're done discussing the budget? Wouldn't that make sense? If the board takes some action that affects that item, it just seems like it needs to be. Doesn't that seem to make sense? I guess it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah. paragraph, what, 1, 2, 3 on here says we recommend acceptance of this bid with the following provisions. The required bonds are supplied by the contractor. The projects are approved by the Sumner County Board of Education, and the Sumner County Schools 24-25 budget is approved. So if the budget was not approved, then I guess that would then null this as well.
We can't legally sign the bid document until our budget's approved.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed?
No.
Abstain.
One abstention. Who was the no? Mr. Graham was a no, and Mr. King abstained. Motion carries. Next item, discussion and action regarding the 2024-2025 board meeting schedule. Motion approved by Ms. Andrews, second by Mr. King. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item, discussion and action regarding the federal projects budget for fiscal year 2024-2025. Your motion? Motion to approve by Mr. Wise, second by Mr. Daniels. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item, discussion and action regarding revision to policy 4.600 grading system on first reading.
Second.
Motion approved by Mr. Wise, second by Ms. Andrews. Any discussion? Ms. Andrews?
Yeah, I just want to say I did reach out to a middle school. I think the update on here is specifically for middle school, just to check with the principals to get an opinion on that, and was told that this is well accepted through our middle school principals, that it actually reduces testing, kind of eliminates, I guess, exams for middle school students. Not necessarily the end of the year project that they do, but the actual testing of the exams, and this is just kind of when taking into consideration the other testing that they do throughout the year, that the exams was more, for lack of a better term, was not necessary because they get so many other points. So they were in favor of the policy.
Yeah. Mr. Hallman and Ms. Skinner and their teams have worked really hard with middle school principals to work through this and get something that meets all their needs.
My agenda just went away, and we were not through with the agenda.
Oh,
We're in the middle of a motion and a second and discussion.
Let me go back to the agenda. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 4, my mouse is not moving. So we had a motion and a second and discussion. Any further discussion on item number 4? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is discussion and interaction regarding naming Pat Brown Virtual Academy.
I move to approve.
Motion to approve by Mr. Daniels, second by Ms. Hayes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Where is this presentation? I don't see it on my agenda.
You've already voted on
Okay.
You've already approved.
All right, so we keep on going. We're on unfinished business now.
Keep on rolling.
Discussion and interaction regarding amendments to the general purpose budget.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Mr. Daniels, second by Mr. Gregory. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item, general discussion and interaction regarding amendments to the federal budget.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Mr. Daniels, second by Mr. Gregory. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Say no. Motion, seeing none, motion carries. My tongue's getting wrapped around my eye too. Discussion and interaction regarding the general purpose budget for fiscal year 2024-2025.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Mr. Daniels, second by Mr. Hayes. Any discussion? Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I move to remove the additional $5 million that would go into the stadium projects. I don't think now's the right time to ask for additional funds from the county commission. Obviously, last meeting I was fine with asking for additional funds, but that was to get teachers to $50,000, and that's not going to happen. It doesn't make sense to me to possibly put the county in a position to raise taxes, and then our teachers are also affected by that. So we tell our teachers all the time to make it work. I think that we should also make it work without that additional $5 million.
So your motion is to remove.
Yeah, the $5 million.
And I apologize, I'm having trouble hearing you. Our sound system is
Yeah.
Turn the sound up.
not working as well tonight for
So,
some reason.
so remove the $5 million on the capital for the stadium projects.
All right, motion's been made to remove $5 million. Second by Mr. Lacy. Any discussion? Mr. King?
Yeah, I
Are
just,
you through for?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I was thinking about that 5 million, and I do have an issue with asking the county for that, with the same reason, you know, that Mr. Graham mentioned. But one idea I thought about, and just hear me out, is, and I'm, you know, looking through all this, we typically budget expenditures over our revenues and then plug the hole with reserves. We've done that every year, trending back. So I'm just wondering why and of course that becomes a restricted amount in our reserve money that's there for us to use, and it, you know, but it helps us balance our budget. We don't spend 100% of our budget. So for example, this budget is $378 million. We spend 90% of this budget. That leaves $37 million that's budgeted but not spent. And what we've done in the past, is my understanding, is we don't typically spend all of it. In fact, we never spend all of our money. And there's always a surplus, okay? And should we spend, you know, over that 90%, and then we start getting into the closer we get to that 100% mark, we have that reserve money restricted in our reserves that we can get without county commission approval. It's there for the taking. We budget it, we restrict it. That means it's there, we can use it. We do that every year. A couple years ago, the amount on the presentation was 43 million. Last year it was 37 million. This year I don't know where it is. It's kind of, we've not really discussed that item. I know we're using reserve money, but my thought on that is we may not actually have to spend that reserve money unless we get close to 100% of our lines. And of course, the reserve money for that we've allocated is 26 million, which, you know, if we don't spend, if we spend 90%, that leaves 10%. We wouldn't even touch that 26 million. So if we're talking 5 million, why can't we just add that on and restrict that as budgeted expenditures over revenues as a restricted amount in our reserves? I think there's money in our reserves that would cover that 5 million. And that would save us, we could just solve this issue right now without even having to go to and asking money from the county commission. And to me, that just sounds like a great idea. Just, you know, if it's, so, I'll let others discuss if there's any more discussion before I make any kind of a motion, but that's an idea. If anyone wants to add to it, please do.
Motion's on the floor now to, in a second, and in discussion of moving the 5 million. So that's what we're on, in the discussion on the amended motion. Ms. Andrews.
Yeah, you know, specifically when the bleachers fell at Beach, you know, we have had a lot of, you know, community people say, well, if it was Liberty Creek, you know, y'all spent a lot of money at Liberty Creek. Once again, Liberty Creek was purchased with a bond and was restricted to that money only being able to be spent at Liberty Creek. But, you know, community said, that's what we want. And year over year in the past, the reason the bleachers fell is because we would shift money away, because sometimes people didn't want to have to make hard decisions. We have it here. We want to talk about safety for kids. We want to talk about safe places for them to learn, or places for them to play, all that. I got involved to be on this board because practically of what we're sitting here right now. Because we want to kick the can down the road. We don't want to make the hard choices. Hard choices don't always have to be, let's cut it out. We need to have a vision for Sumner County. We need to have a vision of what we want to provide for our students. We need to have a vision to say, this is what we expect to be able to do for our teachers, for our staff. Our teachers and staff are taxpayers. They are. They also want to work in nice facilities. They want to have nice facilities for their students. And we'll say, well, they, there has to be a tax increase. We talked about this before. When teachers are making thousands of dollars more per year, they don't have a problem spending a couple $100 more a year on their taxes. It balances. I'm not willing to go back down that road that we did year after year, decade after decade, just so 20 years from now we can have something else fall apart, because we can pay for it, we just don't want to.
Mr. Graham?
So when we talk about the word vision, I remember when I sat in that crowd and I talked at that podium to oppose investment in a barn that would have been about $3 to $5 million of investment. And I heard the word vision over and over and over and over again. And I thank God right now that we're not in that barn doggle, because we're already trying to figure out how to pay our teachers and already trying to figure out how to get them to $50,000 a year, because every other system's there. The bleachers falling is nowhere near cataclysmic as what we're going to be as a system if we can't attract and retain talent. And when we talk about building stadiums that look like minor league baseball stadiums in their facade, and we've got teachers who have been patiently waiting to see if we were able to pass a budget or not to give them much deserved and much needed raises. And raises that, we can play the emotional card and say teachers deserve every bit and more. But we can also play the business card and say we're getting our butt kicked by the other school districts. They're already there. They're already at $50,000 a year. I've already talked to teachers personally who said, hey, I'm dedicated, but I ain't that dedicated. I'm leaving. Just to make $2,700 more and drive 13 more miles down the road. I don't think it's fair, number one, to accuse the county commission of not giving us more money. It's not their money. It's all the citizens' money. And we are representatives. We are elected. Except for me, I'm appointed. I get reminded of that often. But we're still representatives. And we actually have a balancing act. We have to balance making sure that we have everything we need to provide a great education and great opportunities for our students, with the least restrictive burden on our citizens who vote for us. And aside from interactions at home, teachers and assistants have the greatest impact on a student. Not what color brick is at a stadium. And so if I have to choose bleachers or teachers at this point, I choose teachers. It has been made clear by our county commission that, being good stewards of funds, they are not going to give us more money on the maintenance of effort. And we can redesign this request, but it also runs the risk of being rejected. And I hate to say this, but there's a calendar which shows when the warm months are, and I don't know why we didn't bid before springtime. That poor track at Gallatin has been neglected for years and years and years, and years and years and years. But only when it was politically convenient was it ever brought up. So, I'm in good faith asking to remove the extra $5 million, still have wonderful, nice bleachers for our schools and for our students without all the additions. We can add the additions later, especially if sales tax revenues go up, we get extra money, these kinds of things. But we need to focus on our staff right now, or else they won't be here later. I think this year we're in a crisis. I think next year we're in a catastrophe.
Mr. King?
Yeah, I just thinking about what you said. I mentioned there was we have a surplus every year. That particular year that barn was voted on, there was a surplus of 31 million that was not spent by this board or by either, and and someone said, oh, we didn't have any money for the track. Well, there was 31 million of unspent funds, and that was not a concern. So just wanted to add to that. I agree with him. I agree with Mr. Graham. I question. Part of me is just my mind is blown because when I think about the last 2 years, our enrollment has not changed. I mean, it's stayed roughly around 30,000 students, fluctuating up and down. Enrollment has been the same, including what we're getting from the county this year and the state. We've increased our recurring revenue by 60 million in 2 years. That's the 2022-23 school year, 23-24 school year, and then going into 24-25. We've increased our recurring local and state revenue by 60 million. We got 14 million in increased MOE from the county going into 2022. We got 31 million from the state last year. We got an additional 7.5 from the county this year, another 7 from the state. That's 59.5 million, 60 million. And then on top of that, we are adding, we're being told that we need another 26 million out of our reserves for a total of $86 million. And we can only get our teachers to 47.8. I have a hard time buying that. And I don't believe it's because we built some new schools. I don't buy that. We got bonds for those schools, and then we spent money on technology and furniture and then staff. But 86 million, and we can't get our teachers to 50K. I think there's money there. I don't think we need this 5 million, but I'm saying let's, instead of, and this may be another motion, maybe not to your amendment. If we need that money, let's restrict it in our reserves so that we can get it if we absolutely need it, because chances are we're not even going to spend it. We don't spend our lines to 100%. Think about this: we restricted 43 million in our reserves for 2022 and 23 school year. Voted to restrict 43 million of reserves to plug the hole over between budgeted expenditures over revenues, and we never even touched it. Never touched it. So if this amendment fails, I might come back with an amendment to say let's just, instead of asking for it, let's just budget it out of reserves as a restriction. Chances are we're not even going to need it. I think we have the money. Now, I could go a step further and say we need to redo this whole thing and get teachers to 50K. Do it today. Do it now. But I said that at our last meeting. I just, and it's another 8.5 million. Maybe restrict another 8.5 and get them to 50K. I feel like there's money there. We have a surplus every year. The lines aren't spent. I don't see why we can't do it. Get the teachers to where they need to be. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this amendment yet, but if it fails, then that might be another option.
Mr. King, Ms. Andrews?
I'm tired of picking either or. I want both and. Let's pay our teachers. Let's do the athletic facilities. And if you really want to know, I'm still sad that we didn't do the barn. We had a matching grant from the state. It would have been a great opportunity. Mr. Lacey said a couple of times on, it would be great if we had a barn to be able to do some 4-H and some FFA events. I still wish we had it. I understand why we didn't. It's not a hill I'm willing to die on. I think it's a great piece of history in Sumner County. Right now, we're talking about athletic facilities and we're talking about paying teachers. We want to send over to the county for additional funds to get the teachers up to $50,000 and to do the additional for classified staff. I'd be happy to do that. I'd also like to add in athletic trainers and a lot of other things that we need in this county. But my understanding is, you know, looking around, watching meetings and seeing what the reality is, I think this is a good compromise. I think this is a great start. I think Mr. Langford has shared some ideas on how we can work through this and come to an agreement with it. When I approved the budget originally, it was less than what I wanted to approve to begin with. Anything less than that, no.
Mr. Graham?
I guess some things are worth fighting for, like last meeting, but it didn't happen now, did it? I would like to withdraw my motion because I think Mr. King has a more creative solution.
Who was the second? Are you okay with that, sir? Yes, sir. All right, motion's been withdrawn. We're back to the main motion. Mr. King.
All right, then I make a motion that we take that extra $5 million and we restrict it in our reserves to use as needed.
Motion has been made to put the $5 million in reserve and use it as needed.
Second.
Second from Mr. Graham. Discussion on that.
I'd like to ask if we could, like, I don't know where this $5 million is going to come from.
I'm not sure either. But
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can ask, I don't want to put Ms. Brown on the spot, but, you know, we could pull 4.4 million out of our estimated undesignated fund balance right now.
So, and I know we go through this often, that the reserve balance as is an estimate, you know, ending balance plus our anticipated revenue plus our minus our anticipated expenses, all of that. And so until we close our books, we won't know if we have additional reserve to budget. That based on the estimate right now, which is hopefully a conservative estimate, we would have additional reserve after we close our books that could be budgeted. But as of right now, that isn't shown here. It would be kind of gambling that those come in better than estimate. And I hope that they do come in, but I have, you know, I'm looking at every line, myself and Rhonda, we're trying to estimate every salary and every expenditure. And as capital comes in, you know, different things come in unspent, we will pick up reserve, but then that doesn't mean we'll pick up necessarily 5 million. So that's my concern.
Let me jump in. We've got over $56 million that we're spending in our reserve already budgeted, which is, I mean, really almost all of our reserve. I would like to add that we've increased teacher pay by $11,700 over the last 4 years. That's about 35%. This budget includes about a 35% pay increase for classified staff, which, you know, I would love for us to continue to push. I will say that if you watch, like, you know, earlier in a slide where I mentioned trying to work together with the county, I can assure you, Mr. Jones and I don't agree on a whole lot, but I think that we will agree on this, that there's not a huge desire on the county commission side to increase taxes. I think we agree on that point. And so I've tried to work in a way that keeps us from having to raise taxes. And I don't know, you know, if you're looking at that, I don't know how you get much higher than where we are without having a battle with the commission over raising taxes. I just, you know, because we also have to think about what's feasible for next year and what kind of whole gap we have to close to get to a balanced budget next year too.
So are you basing your assessment of the reserves, because that 67 million we got from a previous years, the 119, as I recall.
It's not 119. We've had this argument so many times, Mr. King. 119 includes everything from school nutrition
No,
to.
I know that, but I'm saying that was, we got that 67 after all the restrictions
Right.
from the 119. We deducted it from the 119. And, but going, when the books closed in June of last year, another 7 million went into our reserves.
That's because if you look back on, I mean, if you look at the slide that I shared with you, we budgeted off of 126 million maintenance of effort, anticipating that the commission might change the penny allocations and just meet our maintenance of effort.
Right.
They very graciously did not do that. They left it where it was before. So we captured an extra $7 million, 7.7 million. What you're not going to see in this next budget, if you look, the property tax percentages dropped from 60.6 to 50.7 or 50.8, something like that. So, you know, it's going to be based on sales tax revenue, which may come in higher, but if there's a downturn, you know, or sometimes like, I don't know enough about sales tax, this would be a Mr. Lawing question, but, you know, the city of Hendersonville, for instance, is considering lowering the sales tax on food. That has an impact on, I'm all for lowering the sales tax on food in Hendersonville. I think it's a great idea, but it will affect our sales tax revenue. So, you know, there are variables there that we've never, Ms. Brown's never projected off of. We've always been heavy on property tax and lower on sales tax. So, you know, there's some variables there that we would have to, you know, she's going to have to work to try to identify because it's just very different from what we've done in the past.
Well, and what I'm saying is, I'm just talking about the reserves. 7 million was added to our reserves, so we have that. Why can't we restrict 5 million of that? Is what I'm saying.
No, that her reserve estimate is using that 7 million. It's including that.
So the comptroller reported 126 million. You know, that was our reserve at the end of June.
I mean, you can say 127 million or 117 million or 165 million. It's not the actual reserve number.
Well, it's not what we can access. There's restrictions on the fund, on that money.
Yes, so it's not money that you can tap into.
Well, we can tap into some of it.
67 million of it last year.
But I'm saying that's increased 7 million.
No, I'm telling you that based on Ms. Brown's forecast, it's about, you know, 61 million or 60 million because we're allocating 56.5 in undesignated fund balance. If you look on page 8 of the budget, 27.765 million committed for education to balance the budget, another 28.4 million for capital. That's, you know, just eyeballing it, it's about a little bit over 56 million.
Right.
Right. So if you look at what we have budgeted or forecast for undesignated fund balance, that leaves about 4.5 million. Now, do I hope, as I said last time, do I hope that our undesignated fund balance comes in significantly higher than $4.5 million? Yes. But can we guarantee that? No. And what you don't want to do is build a $338 million budget on the hope that more money is going to be left in reserve, because when you do that, you know, those of us that have been teaching for a while can remember a time where the county had to change insurance rates from paying 85% of the employee portion to 80%. There were times where we weren't sure we were going to be able to pay employee insurance at the end of the year. There were times when we weren't sure we were going to be able to run buses. You know, a lot of us that taught before 2012, remember we had to do fundraisers to buy paper and stuff like that. Those are the kind of things that happen when you cannibalize yourself too much. And that's my discomfort with going much more deeply into the reserve.
So so I'm looking at page 8. These numbers haven't changed from what was presented to us originally?
Slightly, yeah.
Slightly, okay, I'm just looking.
We reduced our capital budget, and so the amount that's restricted for
Oh,
capital.
11,521 versus 11. Okay, so
And so
it's
in
still
that
around.
unbudgeted reserve went down slightly.
Yeah, right. So minus, not counting the undesignated fund balance, that restricted amount, those first few lines there, that's 18 million. Our school nutrition budget is what, 5.6 million? Is that right? Because I looked in the back on here and it said reserve money used for school nutrition was 5.6 million.
But that's in the school nutrition budget, school nutrition budget wouldn't be, our reserve balance wouldn't be shown on this budget at all.
Okay, so does any of our reserves encompass use up school nutrition?
The school nutrition budget does, yes, sir.
is that part of our reserve balance? Our total reserve balance, 126 million from the comptroller, does that include the school nutrition amount?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just trying to
But
think.
it is not included in any of the numbers in the general purpose budget that we're discussing.
Right, and I pulled that from back here. Okay, so that's 18 million, 5.6 million, well, 18.45, that's $21 million.
Just to be clear, the school nutrition reserve balance can only be used to fund things within the school nutrition.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to come up with how much we have in our, I'm trying to figure out how much we have in our reserve.
Right, but it doesn't matter if it's designated for school nutrition, you can't use it for anything other than school nutrition. It's not reserved.
I know. I don't think you're seeing what I'm doing. I'm taking the 126 million that the comptroller reported, and I'm subtracting every restriction that we don't have access to, or that money that's part of that we don't have access to. And what does that leave us?
I mean, I would tell you it leaves you about 56 million plus the 4.5 that's in the undesignated fund balance until we close the books and have actual.
So can we get some kind of accounting of that? Is there some breakdown of the reserve balance? Because we're talking about.
It's called the best CFO in the state of Tennessee right here.
I understand that.
No, I'm talking. Let me finish, please. She spent months, and her team has spent months, and they're phenomenal. And I'll be honest, it's insulting.
It is not.
It is very insulting.
It is not. I'm asking for information. I'm asking for information
We've
from
done
my
this for
constituents.
years. Fine.
You're telling me I'm insulting her. I'm not. You are out of order. Just trying to get information.
Right. And
there's no insult going on.
Okay, she's trying to explain to you, and she's explained it about 5 times now, where you get the number, right? The number that we believe is accessible. Now, it will move, and it will change, and it will probably be bigger than about $61 million, right? But I am telling you, it is a dangerous proposition to budget too deeply into your undesignated fund balance, hoping, because, for instance, we had several years ago where they took 1.8 million away from us in BEP after we'd already done our budget. We lost 1.3 million plus another 180,000 off TISA in the last 2 months. There are variables that are going to hit. I mean, we had, what if we have a roof that, that gets damaged or something like that? We're going to need that money that's above this $4.5 million that's projected right now. We're going to need that next year in case we hit other emergencies. We are budgeted very tightly. I would love if there was another 8 million in here hidden, we would be taking teachers to 50,000. But I can tell you what happens when you get too far ahead of the horse is you look at some other districts, like for instance, Williamson County right now is having a debate with their county commission about raising taxes, right? Because they rushed to 50,000 and now they don't have the money in there to cover it and they're jammed. There will be other districts that are going to be in the same boat either this year or next year. I'm all for it. I want to get to 50,000. I want to get to 55,000. But I also have to live in a world that tells me that right now, our county commission is going to most likely set the tax rate at certified neutral. When you set the tax rate at certified neutral, you lose a penny, probably about $1 million, $1.1 million, $1.2 million, something like that, right off the top because of all the appeals. All right, and that's without them changing it, because really, like if you set a certified neutral tax rate, nobody's taxes go up, but people are still going to appeal because they're going to see, my house went up 77%. If you appeal, it'll go down. That costs the county money, even though we're at the certified neutral rate. You're losing inflation right off the top. So you're basically taking the revenue that we're decreasing, or that we're receiving, you're decreasing it by 3 or 4%. We're already talking that we're being asked to budget $2 million less than we received last year. There's only so many of those punches that you can take, and we have to try to budget with enough wiggle room based on whatever that undesignated fund balance comes in at. If it's 5 million, if it's 7 million, if it's 10 million. Personally, I hope it's closer to 10, because then it'll let us do some things next year and be in a better position next year when we're doing our budget.
I'm just trying to get information.
Sure.
I would like to know, and I would like a breakdown of the reserves. I want to know what they're starting at. In fact, in the previous budgets, up to 2019, you look on these slide presentations, it started out with beginning reserve balance, and then after 2019 they were not part of that anymore. If that can be included on here, then I think that information should be available. I'm just asking for that. I'm just asking what is the, and I'm talking about reserves that closed last year, not what's coming this year. I'm talking about 126 million.
We walked through
that
that
were-
reserve at least 3 times in the fall, how we got to the 67
But we talked
million.
about the previous year's reserves. That was off the 119
Right, because
that
you
was
have-
closed in 2022.
Right, you have to close the books. No, that was not, that was current reserve.
It was the 119, we talked about the 119 that was closed out June 30th of 2022.
No.
Yeah.
The reserve that Ms. Brown broke down for us in the fall was last year's. It was after we closed the books. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a board decision whether you
Fund
trust
balance
Ms. Brown's projection
calculated
or not.
fiscal year 2022. This is what we got in our presentation. This was the fiscal year 2022 reserve balance breakdown, and it has everything listed of how all the restrictions. That's all I'm saying. Why can't we get that for
And I'm saying we'll be
the
happy to give it to
126?
you after the budget.
So I'm just trying to get information. I'm saying if we do that, there's likely to be some money there because we don't spend everything. Let me just get back to my original point. We have a surplus every year when we close the books. Last year it was 8 million, 7 to 8 million. Previous year it was 31 million. Year before that it was 21 million. The year before that it was 10.5 million. We trend that way. So I'm just saying there's money somewhere in our budget, and I think we can restrict that amount in our reserves. So so that's my motion. I already made it. So I can't remember if I had a second or not.
You got a second?
I did.
We're in discussion
Okay.
now. Any further discussion? Seeing none, just to remind you, the motion is to take $5 million out of reserve, or Mr. Johnson.
The motion is to take extra $5 million in reserve and use as needed.
Sorry, say that one more time.
The way I understood the motion, you can correct me, Mr. King. Motion to take extra $5 million in reserve and use as needed.
That's what I understood the motion.
Future reserve.
I think so. I
Take $5 million, put it in reserve, and use as needed.
restrict 5 million in our reserves to use as needed. Yes.
Motion to
All right, so that's the
restrict
motion.
5 million in reserve and use as needed. So the motion is to restrict 5 million in reserve and use as needed.
All right. I request a roll call vote, please.
All right. Ms. Hayes?
No question. And does that leave us with a balanced budget?
Not if you restrict it. We would have to allocate it.
So what does that mean for
I was
you?
trying to look back.
You,
at that
you
for a
can't
second.
take $5 million and just reserve it to say, hey, if we come up short, we'll use that. Like, we would have to allocate it into lines to balance the budget.
Yeah, so we would have to increase the, to do that, you would have to either decrease your undesignated fund balance to 0 and balance it with, in your page 8, line, the 3,900, the budgetary fund balance committed for education. And you would have to increase that, or you could put the full 5 million into that budgetary fund balance committed for education, and then you would reduce your revenue by the 5,638,000 that we had requested from the county commission. So you'd reduce that revenue. On page 5, you'll see that number kind of midway down. It says additional county revenue requested. And that would come down, and then you would have to come through and hope that your budgetary fund balance committed for education comes in 5 million higher than what we're showing now. We're showing now 60,668,34. That is already budgeted. So you would be increasing that to 65 some odd million.
That answer your question, Ms. Hayes?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. White?
I'm sorry. On top of the request for a roll call vote, I would request that when we vote, please turn your mic on. If you do not have your mic on, your vote is not recorded, and I'd like for the votes to be recorded, please.
Mr. King?
I just want to, I'm just confused because in the past, we've had budgeted funds that we used out of reserves that were not designated, that were not budgeted, or we had reserve money that was not budgeted, that we restricted for expenditures over revenues to be used.
It's like the 27 million in prime.
Right, yeah, and I'm just, what I'm proposing is, increasing that amount, that restricted amount by that 5 million.
But that money, so you've got a reserve balance, right? And so right now we're saying anticipated it's $60 million. And so we've taken that 60 million and we've used part of it to balance our operating budget. We've used part of it to balance our capital budget. And then there's 4 million left. So in order to put like a committed for education, like kind of a holding place, your reserve balance would have to be in excess of that 60 million anticipated right now. And so whatever you would have to have, you can't reduce it unless you take it out, unless you cut the budget. You're essentially kind of forcing that reserve balance to be higher than we're forecasting right now to have it in a place. And also, as a side note, if you're using it to balance your budget, it wouldn't be unallocated, it would actually be allocated. You know what I'm saying? It wouldn't be sitting here unrestricted or committed. It would actually be committed to balance your budget if you reduce your revenue by that $5 million. So because your expenditures have to balance with your revenue and your reserve balance. So if you're going to reduce the revenue by $5 million, which was that request to the county commission, in order to offset that, you're going to have to reduce your expenditures, or you're going to have to balance it with a reserve balance. Okay. So you're forcing that reserve balance anticipation higher by that $5 million.
Okay, so that's what I'm. Okay, great. That's what I'm requesting. And just back, I'll just recap. I don't think we're going to spend it because we always end up with a surplus because we never spend 100% of our lines. All right. So, could you restate my motion if you don't mind?
We got more discussion, Mr.
Okay.
Gregory. Mr. Gregory.
Ms. Brown, in your professional opinion, and you're the best in the whole state of Tennessee, is what Mr. King is advocating, is that safe?
I'll reiterate with what Dr. Langford said. As we close the books, we hope that our reserve balance will come in less. It was my reserve is based on an estimate as of April, and so as we get closer and we get closer to the closing books, we may not spend some of the capital, or some of the expenditures we thought we may need may not happen. Though there will be different variables because there are thousands of lines of information, and that we try to predict. That includes revenue, that includes expenditures, and just the unknown. And so, will our reserve balance come in higher? I hope so, but right now I cannot confidently say that yes, our reserve balance is going to come in $5 million higher, and so that is a safe assumption. If I was confident in that, I would have already had that in the budget. But once again, just like Mr. Loing, and it is a conservative estimate based on all the information we know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Mr. Graham?
I thought Mr. Lacy's light was on. I think, so if I understand it correct, I know we might be beating a dead horse, but I'm not the numbers guy. So when we restricted basically money from capital, put in kind of in a cloak in reserve, and hope that we capture revenue to cover it. Is that what this is? Like so basically, when we put a restriction on it, we're not counting on it 100% as being revenue. We're hoping that it comes, but it's restricted in reserve. And
No,
so we kind of fill that as we get the revenue. Is that what you guys are kind of saying?
No, we're confident that the 56 million that's committed is there.
Right.
I think I'm not as confident. I just think it's cutting to the bone, and it's way real. I think Mr. Lancaster mentioned this last month, that he was good with where we were, but that it was aggressive in the way that we estimated the use of our reserves. But if we went much deeper, he wouldn't be comfortable. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm just trying to remember what he said. It's definitely where I am, is that, I mean, listen, I would love to accomplish everything that's been mentioned here tonight. But I also want to work in the real world of, with math and be something that we can get across the line of the county commission. And I'm concerned, like, I don't think you can allocate money responsibly saying that you hope it's there. I would rather budget what we have, and then if we come up with more, then we can go back and try to allocate things in after the fact if we feel like we're in a good place to do that. I think that's more conservative budgeting, and it's safer. It's definitely safer. Because we're being really aggressive in this budget.
Well, I get it. I get it. And listen, I'm glad we're all having this conversation. I know kind of tempers are getting heated, but we're talking about a lot of money. We're talking about a lot of the people's money, and we need to have thorough conversations on how we spend it. My opinion is, I think if you look at probabilities, I think Mr. King's plan has a higher probability of passing the county commission than the other proposed budget. And so when we're talking about, raise freezes and working on the contingency budget and all these things, I think we have a higher propensity of what Mr. King is suggesting passing through the county commission and coming back to us with plenty of time to spare than not.
And just understand, contingency will happen based on the budgeting process. Like, it's going to happen at least for July, probably August, just based on the calendar, because the meetings aren't until July. The final commission is not until July 29th.
Even from happening during the warm weather.
Mr. Lacy. Did Mrs. Hayes' question get answered? Are we going to be voting on an unbalanced budget if we vote for this?
She said her question was answered. Mr. King?
It only would only be balanced if you reduce that revenue and you increase the anticipated the number on page 8.
And I think that's what Mr. King agreed that he wanted to do in his amendment. I think that answered Ms. Hayes' question. You said you wanted to do that, what she explained about how to put the $5 million.
How to balance it.
Right.
Like,
I think y'all were on the same page.
Right, if we vote for this and it passes, it would require that, and it would be balanced.
Right.
Well, these are, there's a lot of terminology, there's a lot of numbers getting thrown around. Just to make it easier, let's say I'm budgeting for the month, and I say, okay, I'm gonna make $2,000 this month, but I'm gonna budget for $3,000 for expenses. Now, where am I gonna get another $1,000 in money? Well, I have some in my savings. If I don't make any more money, I'm gonna pull $1,000 out of my savings to cover that. That's in essence what I'm requesting to do. So, hope that makes sense. In other words, we've got money, we've got expenses that are over our revenues, and if we budget, we fill that, we close that hole with reserve money, and I'm saying add to that money this $5 million. So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Greger?
Without question, everybody sitting in this class, in this room, have family and friends who are teachers. And it's something that we'd all like to do. But you're digging a hole that can't be covered up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greger. All right, is any more lights on? Well,
Sorry, I just want to make sure
Ms.
that
Andrews.
I'm understanding what Ms. Brown is saying, that in order for us to do that $5 million, we have to take that out of our revenue. So if that is okay, and then we're holding it into our savings account, then we would have to make adjustments throughout the rest of the budget then. Would that not be correct?
No, you would reduce your revenue on page,
Right, but we're
page
using
5.
that revenue to pay for other things that we've already budgeted.
So that's where you would have to balance it. You would have to increase the amount of reserve that we're budgeting. And I just want to be clear, it's not savings that already exists. This would be, you're anticipating your light bill, you've been budgeting it at $200 and you're hoping it comes in at $100. And you're going to go ahead and budget that $100 for something else. It's not money we've already saved that we're budgeting. It's a forecast of where our reserve will be at the end of this year. It's not from our previous. I've taken that into account, our expenditures and our anticipated revenue.
Hypothetically, we do that and it doesn't come in, what happens?
I think that was pretty simple. You continue on until you run out of money that's legitimately there in reserve, and then you hope that you get some savings on things like we have 15 snow days and we don't run the buses and we save money there, or we get more outcome money from the state, or different things like that. You're hoping for a revenue stream to show up later that we don't possess.
Yeah, and that would be real tricky too, because you'd technically be spending your restricted balance, and so it would get real hairy there, because we have that 11 million restricted at 3%, and so if we didn't get the full 5 million, you're technically eating into that, where that 3% restricted, unless you cut your budget by $5 million or whatever the reserve didn't come in at.
Ms. Hawkins?
When COVID hit in 2020, did we access money from the reserves to help keep our schools open?
No, nothing more than what we budgeted. Mr. King referenced the old charts that showed where we used undesignated fund. I think the only time that we spent significantly out of our reserve funds is when we went ahead and did a teacher pay raise, knowing that TISA was that $31 million from TISA. We got a little bit ahead of that. I think we did a $2,500 pay increase, but no, we did not. We had enough in our budget to continue to pay everybody. Plus, that's the year that we took the $1.8 million hit, I think, in BEP.
Yeah, so if we, I apologize, I don't remember specifically, but if we had accessed our reserve to pay anything, we would have gone to the county commission for that. But luckily, our state revenue and our local revenue stayed consistent, and so it wasn't like all of a sudden our revenue dropped so that we had to, cut budgets or pull from our reserves. We did have an issue with our daycares because our daycares were shut down, but we require them to keep a certain reserve in case of emergency also.
Mr. Grant. Can I say I really appreciate the simplification of the light bill analogy. That made things much easier for me to understand. I will say, to take that analogy one step further, I think what Mr. King is suggesting is that he's looked at our light bill the last 5 years for the upcoming month and has a pretty good projection of what next month's light bill would be. So I think that's from what I heard when he talked about the revenues and the surpluses. So once again, just from a probability standpoint, I think there's a high probability that his plan will work versus sending the budget and being told no again.
All right, everybody ready to vote? Mr. Johnson?
All right, let's take another stab at this. Mr. King, Ms. Brown, let's see if this is kind of close. The motion is to increase the amount of the estimated reserve to $5 million and to allocate that $5 million from the estimated reserve balance and use to balance the budget. Close? Good? Okay. So motion to increase amount of estimated reserve to $5 million and to allocate $5 million from the estimated reserve balance and use to balance budget.
So you would be requesting to amend the total local taxes revenue down by $5,368,879, because that's the additional county revenue requested on page 5. And then you would be requesting that $5,368,879 be added to on page 8. There's a line 39,100. It said budgetary fund balance committed for education. You would be requesting to increase that $27,765,605 by the $5,368,879.
All right, everybody feel good with that? Because I'm going to go back and listen to that on tape and put it in the minutes.
That sounded about right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Ms. Hayes. Ms. Hayes has a question.
No, I don't. I'm ready to vote.
Ready to vote? Roll call vote?
Yeah, be sure to turn your mics on when you
I
vote.
think I am.
All right. Here we are. Ms. Hayes.
No.
Ms. Andrews.
No.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins.
No.
Mr. Daniels.
No.
Mr. Wise.
No.
Mr. Graham.
Yes.
Mr. Gregory.
No.
Mr. Lacy.
No.
Chairman Brewer.
No.
All right, motion fails.
Back to the original motion. We've got a motion on the floor and a second for approving the general purpose budget. Are we ready to vote?
So moved.
All right, so we're ready to vote. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lacy.
In our 22 to 23, when we were doing our budget, we received $27 million from the state. Where did all those funds go? Because my understanding, speaking to our state representatives, that money was to get teachers to 50,000.
No, that money, like the 50,000 is at the end of next year. So, like if you look, we started in January 2020, teacher pay went up. We were at $36,100. We increased by 4,000 then. It's gone up, like basically with the raise that we're doing this year for teachers, starting teacher pay will have gone from 36,100 to 47,800 in less than 4 years. So that's, or in 4 years. So that's a pretty significant, it's about a 35% increase. Of course, we'd all like to be at 50,000. If you look, what I shared earlier from TISA, the $125 million that the legislature put in this year was to ensure everybody was one step away from 50,000 to split the difference. So realistically, if we had just gone what was in, if we voted just to do what was included from the state, that was about 3 million something. I can't remember the exact number, but that would have been less than we would have been at, roughly one third of where we are now. So it would be like maybe 46.8, 46.9, somewhere in there instead of 47.8. So that's where did it go? It was budgeted into, everything that we've done. I mean, it's, if you look at it, we're looking at increasing teacher pay by 11,700, classified pay $4 an hour on average. That's coming off 2 consecutive years of $1 an hour increases for classified and other raises for teachers and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. Mr. King.
Yeah, just to clarify, is there, what are the new assistant principal positions in this budget that are being assigned?
Okay, so
I know there's the Title I one at Venus Stewart, but what are some of the others?
we're adding a Title I. This is out of the title budget, not what you're voting on tonight.
Okay.
Assistant principal at Venus Stewart, assistant principal at Benny Beals. Okay, and then you've got trying to think, a 5th assistant principal at Gallatin High School. Okay. Go ahead, Frankie. Liberty Creek High School, because of their growth. We added 2 itinerant APs to move around the county to help with IEPs and principal support. Yeah, we'll find it for you in just a second, Mr. King. It's in William Burris Elementary.
So all of that's stayed the same except adding one to Benny Bill's
Yes, there's
Pretty
an
much.
addition, but that's out of the title budget.
title budget.
So that's not out of this budget.
Right, then it'd be a steward's title.
The others are,
Okay, go ahead.
the others are really growth positions. And then we created kind of a new criteria for Gallatin High School because at the start of the year, there were around 1,700 students. And the next largest high school is about 1,550. So those schools have 4 APs. We thought with that kind of ratio that it was best to add one at Gallatin High School. So Gallatin High School, Liberty Creek High School, Burris, and then title funded at Venus Stewart and now Benny Bills, and then 2 principal support APs to meet school needs like IEPs and things like that.
And then how many like newly created admin positions are being proposed? Is it the same as what we had on the original presentation?
Yes.
So there was 6 additional district level staff to support. Are there any others beyond that that are being created?
I'm just looking to check.
You captured them all, Gallatin, Liberty, sorry, the assistant principals, you guys captured them, the itinerant, Liberty Creek High, Gallatin High School, and William Burris Elementary, and then the Venus Stewart and the Benny Bills that are paid out of title funding. So y'all were good there.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about additional admin positions that are in the category of like nurse trainer, teach Sumner coordinator.
Yeah, those are all in there.
Okay, is there any, so there's 6 here. Are there any others that have not, these are the ones that have been, are there any other positions that
Not
have been
new
created?
positions. No.
No more.
I can't remember any.
Yeah. Nothing that wasn't presented before,
Right.
no more positions. That we didn't already present last.
Oh, okay, I got you. No, okay. So, and you guys said, as I recall, that these positions are going to cost about $700,000 in salary and benefits. Is that correct? I think that was a figure that I remember.
I don't remember giving that number, but are you talking about for all those positions or just for the 6 additional district?
Just the 6.
I don't think that would be $700,000. I think it'd be significantly less than that.
Let me
But
look. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll
That's
have to
fine.
get back with you. The way I have it broken out, I don't have it necessarily with like central office versus
I got you.
school staff. Sorry about that.
I thought you all would have had, like, I don't want to, I remember you all saying something about that.
yeah, I'm not saying that I didn't. I
Right,
just don't
yes.
remember it.
I just thought it
Yeah.
would take this long, but that's.
I mean, salaries, I don't think would be $700,000. If you included benefits and
Okay.
everything, that might be
I just
realistic.
remember that number getting tossed out. I
Yeah.
just, you know.
Yeah.
You done, Mr. King?
I'm waiting on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wonder if we could go to the next question or that comment and come back. We can get the
Okay.
answer.
Mr. Daniels?
There's no question.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions. I know when we look at the budget, we're talking about, teacher pay raises, getting them to 50,000. Does the state or federal funding, or does the state or federal dollars we get, does any of that funding designated for support services or classified employees? Or is it typically just for certified employees?
I would-
Like, for example, when you say the state gives us 3.9 million for
Mhm.
quote unquote teacher raises to
Yeah.
help us get closer to 50, that's just certified employees, correct?
Well, TISA, TISA is a different funding formula because it's connected to the student. This year they added in, they wanted to designate the $125 million that they added into the TISA funding formula. They wanted to guarantee that whatever it was, 3.4 or 3.5 million went to teacher pay increases, but they don't give, like, we had this question earlier in the legislative session, is what would it take to get teachers, like covering certified staff insurance from, I think, 40% to 50% or 60%, something like that. It's like you can't calculate that out of TISA because TISA is based on student funding. Like BEP had this crazy calculation and all this stuff, but it was like 60% of 40% of a classroom teacher or something like that. And where TISA sets that dollar amount on students, and then there's you walk it back for what the local contribution is versus the state contribution. So it's kind of dumped into one pot based on student funding, with the guidance from the state now that 3 whatever million has to be spent on certified staff raises.
I guess what I'm asking is, we talk about the raises for our classified employees.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the revenue that comes to our school district, where does that come from to support those raises for those positions?
Yeah, it's out of what we get from state and local, and increasingly the rub that we're going to get is, for instance, like a significant amount of Ms. Dam's budget is funded out of federal money, but the federal money hasn't changed in forever. So the problem has been is that they get the same amount of money for staff, but as we increase pay raises, classified and certified, it puts more pressure on their, at some point it'll cross over and we'll have to catch special ed out of state and local money because it's just math. We haven't reached that point yet, but we're pretty close. And we felt that in title, in other areas as well. We want to continue pushing compensation, just with the understanding that at a certain point, federal money is not keeping up with compensation at the local level. So it comes out of local and state money.
And then the other question I've got is, you'd mentioned that in the past 4 years, we've gone from 36.1 to 47.8, whatever that is. So about $11,000 in the last 4 years. We look at our budgets from a school budget from a total expense standpoint, and we've seen it increase year over year over year. How many millions of dollars does it take to fund that $11,000 in pay raises that we've had over the past 4 years? Do you have any idea? A lot of millions, I would guess.
Millions and millions.
Millions. But I just, I think when we look, trying to keep things in perspective, we talk about how our budget has increased year over year over year. And I think when you look at the percentages of our budget that goes towards salary versus everything else, it's
about 82%.
About 82%. And so that the costs aren't just going up to build stadiums. A lot of the increase in our budget is going to support our teachers and the staff in our schools, the ones that are doing the day-to-day operations, right? The ones that have the most impact on our kids. So it's not a budget that just goes up because it goes up and the money just goes wherever. Most of this money is going back to our teachers and staff.
Yeah, and our entire support staff as well. Our 5,000 employees.
It was approximately $636,000. $636,000 for the what I would consider like not at the school level.
600.
Felt like $36,000. That would be like the EPP, the fine arts, the 0.5 fine arts. Yeah, the increase in athletic director, everything we presented on that slide last week.
Nurse trainer, those things.
I'm just curious, is the landscape position at Liberty Creek, is that new?
No, that was a part-time custodial position that had not been filled.
So we've had it, we just hadn't been filled.
It was a 4-hour custodian position that had never filled. For a while, we had, I think, 2 custodians at Liberty Creek at the high school. So They had somebody who was willing to come do all that for a
Okay.
4-hour position.
So my concern on these extra positions is, if we can't get our employees to 50K, surrounding counties are doing that. We're gonna, they're already getting we're gonna be behind next year. Having these positions is gonna put us even further behind. Because if we can't support the employees we currently have, we should not be adding more administrators, which is going to make it difficult. It's going to make, we're going to need to find 636,000 next year to get our teachers to 50K. That's so, to me, if we're in some kind of crisis, and I believe we are, there's a bidding war going on for teachers ever since Governor Lee passed the law to get teachers to 50K, and so now they're setting the market, and we can't, and we're not getting ours to 50K, but until we can do that, I believe we need to have a hiring freeze on all new admin positions. Anything outside of the classroom level, I think we need. Now, I'm not talking about principals because I consider that classroom level, but I'm talking about these administration positions. If we can't get our people to where they need to be, we don't need to be spending money on these positions. And so, and a couple of, fine arts directors. I taught in Nashville as a music teacher, and we had a fine arts director, and she was great. But I never saw her for 5 years or whatever. And if the goal is to have some people in place that can mentor teachers fresh out of, like band teachers fresh out of college, going into a high school band program, I don't think that's the best thing. The best mentor is another band teacher that's got years of experience. You're not going to find a better mentor. When I started teaching, I went to someone who was already doing it, had 30 years of experience. Nurse trainer, again, you can share, I'm sure there's opinions. I think we can go another year without that. County athletic director, that's nice to have. I think our athletic programs are okay functioning without that. So, anyway, so I'm going to make a motion that we just cut these 6 positions, and so I move that we remove those from this budget, and we allocate that 636 to the. What was that slide? There was of cuts we're already doing. Could we pull that up? It was like $2 million in cuts.
I can tell you the dollar amount. $2,131,121.
So this would get it closer to $3 million. So that's I think we should do that because we need to save every money we can, every dime that we can towards getting our. We're gonna have to fund that recurring next year, and probably with raises, it's just gonna put an additional $636,000 burden on getting our teachers to 50K. So I move that we remove those positions.
I'll second. Motion been made to amend the general purpose budget by the $636,000, seconded by Mr. Lacy. Any discussion?
I would like to add that in that you're cutting, like for instance, I just pulled up, I don't think the belief that we're hemorrhaging employees, we're in better shape than we've ever been. We currently have 155 certified openings, 102 classified. We've been significantly higher than that at this point in the last couple of years. I think our compensation plan is working at attracting new hires. I know we have the best insurance in Middle Tennessee. I think there are a lot of things that make Sumner County attractive to people. I don't see this, I'd love to get to 50,000, but I don't think that's going to scare off people or cause people to leave in droves. It's just not happening numerically. I think that we anticipate you know, we're already running the largest undergrad teacher college in the state of Tennessee. 2 of those positions are an investment in continuing to be able to grow our own teachers, because I can tell you there are not enough teachers out there. We're going to be growing our own for the future. I would differ on the nurse trainer, because I think that what we're seeing is an uptick in the number of athletic trainers, coaches, extracurricular sponsors, principals, teachers that want to be trained in CPR and other aspects of health for their student body, and it's taxing the work that Ms. Herring's team is able to do. The county athletic director, when I talk to high school principals, the number one thing that they ask for, or near the top of what they ask for, is a full-time county AD, because the pressure on our high school, especially and increasingly middle school principals and schools, is supervision, compliance measures. You know, there's a significant amount of strain that's put on our schools to manage and support young coaches. You know, the part-time elementary music director, or excuse me, coordinator is a reallocation. It doesn't cost us anywhere. It's someone's already in our budget. It's a reallocation of the instructional support staff. The part-time secondary, you know, would in my mind be a retired band director, Mr. King, to go back to your point, someone that has done this, because we do have, I mean, I can tell you a high school AP that's former band director said to me, you would never put a first-year person out of college in charge of you'd never make them the head football coach, but we do have band directors all the time. We've increasingly got that happening, and we're losing some good ones because they weren't ready, and we need to be able to support them. So, I mean, that would be, you know, $600,000 doesn't put you much down the line towards getting to $50,000 for teachers. And I think it strips us, you know, as we said, we want to save money wherever we can, but we don't want to cut investments and innovations for the future that are going to benefit our school system for many years to come.
Mr. Johnson, would you read?
Okay, so the motion is to remove 6 positions, which I think are nurse trainer, Teach Sumner coordinator, administrator, grant administrator, elementary guidance leadership coach, consulting teacher, county athletic director, secondary fine arts, and elementary fine arts, totaling $636,000 from the budget.
That's the motion. See no further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Yeah, can I show of hands on the ayes?
So we're on the ayes.
Gotcha.
All right, motion fails. Back to the main motion of the general purpose budget. Mr. Lacy.
Yeah, I just will say this, you know, when I speak to my state legislators, they tell me they gave us the money to get our teachers to 50,000. There's not going to be any more money coming to get teachers to 50,000. From my conversations with them, if we truly wanted to get and this is not a knock against Dr. Langford, Dr. Phillips could have got teachers closer to 50,000, but he chose not to. If it was truly important to get our hourly people where they should be, we could have done that last year. Gallatin High School track. I just feel like it's not that important. Bleachers are maybe more important. District 6 got up here in a board meeting and said that our track at Gallatin High School is unsafe. You know, if it's a priority, I understand why we didn't get it bid quick enough. It happened, what, 10 months ago when all this track stadium stuff started happening. It was in August. If it was truly a priority, why haven't we already got bids, and why did we not get it started sooner? Like I said, it's just really disappointing sitting up here on this board watching everything go on. I would challenge you, Dr. Langford, you're an educator. If Mr. King is wrong on his assumptions of the reserves, why not have a coaching session and you guys work together on the numbers so every year y'all don't have a fight on what's in the reserves? I just feel like if we really cared about teachers, students, we would do things differently.
Mr. Lacy, Mr. Brown.
In the spirit of trying to get this budget more appetizing to be passed by the county commission, I'd like to make a motion to remove the additional $1.76 million to increase coaching stipends.
Motion's been made to remove $1.7 million in coaching stipends. Is there a second? Is there no second? Your motion fails.
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Lacy. Discussion. Mr. Graham?
I think increasing these stipends is kind of redundant, because if we can get this budget passed, or we can get the county commission to pass this budget, the coaches are already getting an increase in their general salary as well. And right now, I know we're not going to get to 50. I know it's not going to happen, but right now I think we just need to get a budget passed that will be approved. And the more we chisel away at it, of what, community members who vote county commissioners in think is unnecessary expenditures, I think the closer we'll get. So that is why I make that motion to remove the $1.76 million at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Seeing no other lights come on, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No. Motion failed. Back to the main motion of the general purpose budget. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. King?
Yeah, I'm just going to say one final thing on this budget. Just to recap, we $60 million in new revenue, recurring revenue, plus $26 million to get us to $86 million of new revenue going for recurring expenses in this budget. And I just don't understand how we can't get to 50K. Now, I wish, I wish that we could have a, kind of like what Mr. Lacy was saying, when budget season comes around next year, maybe perhaps a budget committee that can work alongside our team to help us understand the complexity of everything. I think that would be very, very helpful. And I think that, again, I believe there's money in here. We just haven't found it. It's because look, we have a surplus every year, and so sometimes a very significant surplus. So I feel like we should have got our teachers to 50K. I'm not happy about this last minute budget item with the stadium money. I believe we should have had more time to allow the public to have input, for us to look at it, for us to, I asked for a breakdown of the school, each school and all that. So, and again, I don't think the county commission, I think they've done a great job, good faith effort, giving us 7.5. I don't want to ask them for more at this point. I think we have plenty. We have I think we're funded, and I think we can do a lot more with what we have. So I'm going to be a no on the budget.
Daniels?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. Number one, I believe at our last meeting, you mentioned that we'd be opening the bids prior to this meeting and be reviewing this meeting. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So it wasn't a surprise to me that these items were actually in the budget. Number two, we've got a number of board members that I had mentioned that they'd like to see us get to 50. How much additional would it take to get us to 50?
$8.5 million, I think we said last month.
And I'd like to make a motion that we increase the request to our commission to include the extra $8.5 million to fund the teacher raises to get us to 50,000.
Made to increase the budget. That's second by Ms. Andrews. Any discussion? Mr. Graham?
I made that same motion last meeting and it failed. I thought we weren't allowed to bring motions back up unless the
prevailing side.
I was prevailing. Okay. I would be all for that if we cut the extra $5 million out for the stadiums. And that way we show that we're prioritizing teachers over bleachers. So I'd like to amend his motion if I can, to once again reduce our capital expenditures by $5 million.
We'll save yours as another motion after this one.
Well, he can amend.
I can amend his motion.
We've already got an amended motion right now, so
Okay.
we're working on the amended motion. Mr. Lacy?
Would he consider cutting the 4438 new positions to help cover that?
No.
If we, like I said, I'm gonna be an abstain on this budget vote. If we really wanted to get teachers to that, we could do it in the funds that we already had. So I'll be a no vote on that, and I'll be abstaining from this vote on this budget tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's just gonna increase the maintenance of effort. I mean, another 8.5 million. The county has said they don't have it. They're, they're allocating money for all kinds of things. I've talked to them, talked to David Loing. They're getting spread pretty thin on what they're trying to do. It'd be great if we didn't have $20 million in debt in the county that we pay every year, and we're going to be paying that up through 2036. So I mean it's a shame that we can't do that. But yeah, we have the money here in this what we already have. We don't need to increase maintenance of effort, which is a tax increase. So if you're going on record, Mr. Daniels is going on record wanting a tax increase, a property tax increase for his constituents. I can't do that to mine.
All in favor of raising the budget for $8 million for, you can take the teachers to $50,000 a year, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
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 Where we at?
We have to roll call that one.
Ms. Hayes,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Mr. King,
No.
Ms. Hawkins,
No.
Mr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr. Wise,
No.
Mr. Graham,
No.
Mr. Gregory,
No.
Mr. Lacy,
No.
Chairman Brewer.
Yes.
Motion fails 6-4.
All right, motion failed. We're back to the main motion.
Call the question.
Are we ready to vote? All right, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, we have to vote on call the question.
He's trying to.
So.
He was,
Okay.
he was trying to.
I thought you said your motion.
Yeah, he was pointing to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is for call the question. Thank you.
Yes.
All
All
in
right,
favor,
so-
call
Yeah, let me get that screen up. All right. This is to call the question. Ms. Hayes,
all right.
Yes, let's go.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Mr. King,
No.
Ms. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr. Wise,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
No.
Mr. Gregory,
Yes.
Mr. Lacy,
Yes.
Chairman Brewer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Going straight to the vote. We'll do a roll call vote on that as well.
All right, Ms. Hayes,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Mr. King,
No.
Ms. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr. Wise,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
No.
Mr. Gregory,
Yes.
Mr. Lacy,
Abstain.
and Chairman Brewer.
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is discussion of study session items. I didn't think we had a study session in July.
We do not have a study session in July based on the board meeting schedule that you guys just approved. If I can get it to come up. Our next study session is August 6th. Our next board meeting is July 16th.
July
16th. And just a reminder to everybody to turn your director's evaluations in. And I also emailed everybody a digital version of it if you prefer to fill it out on the computer.
We've got 10 minutes to get comments from board members. We'll go as far as we can go, and then we'll end. Mr. Lacy, you want to start?
Oh, I think we have federal budget.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's one more
I
item.
know.
Sorry. Is there approved federal budget amendments? Oh, I'm sorry.
We already did that. Yeah, we're on study session.
I'm sorry, Mr. Burke.
That's right. Mr. Lacy, do you have anything? Mr. Gregory, you got any comments? Mr. Graham?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Pies?
No comment.
Mr. Daniels? Mr. Hawkins? Mr. King?
No.
Ms. Andrews? Ms. Hayes? And none for me. We are adjourned.